Hey guys. This what if Naruto died and became a hollow? After Naruto dies, he changes into a hollow. This single death will change the lives and afterlives of many. And it's not exactly for the better. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 1 Waco. Naruto's fingers fiddled with the strange chain links that were protruding out of his chest. He closed his eyes, noticing the slight pain in his chest that occurred every time he aggravated the chain. The pain wasn't what was bothering him, though. No, instead, Naruto was focused on the exact copy of himself that lay on the ground unmoving. He hadn't used any clones, so there was no reason that there should be two of him. Besides that, the clone seemed much more solid and defined than Naruto himself, and he wasn't packing a bizarre chain. Naruto took a look at his hand. It seemed, well, hazy for some reason. In the back of his mind, he knew what had happened, even if he didn't want to believe it himself. He felt a little dizzy. Was that normal? Ninjas weren't supposed to have emotional breakdowns. His legs in particular didn't seem to be responding. His legs finally gave out on him, and his eyes glossed over. He knew he was as dead as a doornail. He could remember his death in clear detail, and knew that the clone laying over there was his corpse. But what really got him was the implications of what dying meant for him. I failed. He placed his hand up onto his face, digging his nails into the flesh. That was the worst thing about it, the fact that he had failed to protect his village. With previous actions, it would seem Naruto was invincible, but death is a cruel thing. It can turn the most bright and confident individuals, in this case Naruto, into very gaunt and pessimistic people. Naruto was a particularly extreme case, considering his personality, and the way he had died. Because his death was pathetic. You give up. Naruto roared as he used the last of his clones to create a Rasengan to use on the temporarily weakened God realm. Thinking I'm gonna give up. He finished as he rammed his Rasengan into the last pain body. The pain body grimaced as a deadly ball of chakra ripped into his body. The Shinra Tensei technique had left behind a multitude of rocks behind him, and the deadly attack had sent the dying God realm directly into them. Naruto moved shakily toward the pain body, attempting to take out one of the metal rods. He collapsed to the ground no more than 1 second later. What had killed Uzumaki Naruto was not pain. It was not Akatsuki, or any high-level jutsu. It wasn't even a jutsu. In fact, Uzumaki Naruto had just died from one of the simplest and unlikely ways. Chakra exhaustion. How is that even possible? Was the only thought that ran through Naruto's head as the spirit finally collected himself. The Yondaime, no, his father, had apparently replenished his chakra while restoring the seal. So, just what went wrong? What the hell is this thing? Cried Naruto. He was still messing with the chain on his chest, and he couldn't see any clear purpose it had. He yanked on the chain, and an extremely sharp jolt of pain rocketed through his body. He dropped it like it was a venomous snake, resolving himself to not touch it. The chain was giving off a very ominous aura, and Naruto was tempted to touch it anyway. Luckily for him, something would come along to distract him for the time being. Unfortunately, it couldn't exactly be considered a blessing in any way, shape, or form. This was because people were beginning to enter the secluded clearing where he had died. During the course of a few minutes, Naruto's heart sank more and more. People who he cared about were showing themselves, clearing looking for him. He could see Katsuyu perched on Lee's shoulder. He gasped when Sakura entered the area. Not noticing sets of teeth appear on the chain, Naruto watched the pink-haired Chunin and the rest of his friends make their way to the area where Katsuyu pointed them to. Sakura, along with Team Guy, and a newly healed Hinata, walked over to where Naruto and Pain had finished their battle. Katsuyu mentioned that Naruto had fallen unconscious, and Sakura immediately decided that enough was enough. Naruto was to go back to the village in order to receive medical aid. "He's over here," stated the miniature Katsuyu. She didn't know what had come over Naruto when one of her smaller selves was suddenly dispelled, apparently by the blonde's own volition. Granted, the slug summon had just assumed that Naruto had defeated pain, and that he was merely exhausted. Sakura breathed a small sigh of relief, the feeling of anxiety disappearing from her mind. Hinata looked at the collapsed Naruto, before she breathed a sigh of relief. "And Naruto, thank God," she stated. Sakura smiled at her reassuringly, and performed some quick hand seals. Her hands glowed with a soothing greenish chakra, which she then placed over Naruto's chest. Sakura was beginning to heal him, but she was suddenly overcome with a sense of panic and fear. Something was wrong with Naruto. He looked cold and clammy, and upon closer inspection, he wasn't breathing, a clear absence of life. She didn't know why she hadn't noticed this before. In a desperate motion, Sakura focused chakra to her ear and pressed it over Naruto's heart, praying for the presence of a heartbeat. There was none. "And Naruto," she managed to get out, the chakra fading from her hands. "Sakura-chan," whispered Naruto. It broke his heart to see her like this, and despite the fact that he was the victim, he couldn't help but feel guilty. Guilty because he had failed her alongside Konoha. Clink. "Oh God," murmured Naruto when he saw Sakura break down in tears. He didn't register the small, but noticeable reaction his chain gave while he was watching the spectacle. But he didn't cry, not even after watching Sakura unleash a blood-curdling scream to the sky. The others were startled as they heard Sakura scream to the sky, yelling questions and curse words to God, apparently. Naruto couldn't really tell, she was pretty much blubbering at this point. "Sakura-san, what's wrong? Why are you screaming these?" Lee stopped in mid-sentence as he saw his friend collapsed in the dirt. His eyes widened. Sakura ignored Lee's rabid questioning as she began pumping more and more medical chakra in Naruto, desperately praying that he would revive. "No. No. 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 No." Sakura screamed in her mind as her last-ditch effort in helping Naruto had failed. Sakura then buried herself in his lifeless chest. But now was a time for confusion. What exactly had killed Naruto? From her perspective, there were no signs of a battle. Only small wounds littered his body, nowhere near enough to cause death. Intrigued against her will, Sakura focused on internal causes. What she found shook her to the core. His chakra coils were strained, almost like they were using too much chakra. Chakra exhaustion? She screamed in her mind. If someone told Haruno Sakura that her teammate and friend Uzumaki Naruto had died from chakra exhaustion, she would initially react with disbelief, followed by anger and a nasty punch to the poor guy. But despite seeing Naruto's dead body in front of her, she still acted with disbelief. She focused her hands in a genjutsu release seal. There was no reaction. True to her word, the second thing she felt was anger. Anger particularly directed at her now deceased blonde teammate. Why? You were supposed to get much stronger with this Sannin training, and here you die of fucking chakra exhaustion. You idiot! I hate you! Sakura screamed as she rained down heavy punches on the helpless corpse. However, despite her actions, her mind told her that she did not hate Naruto, but that his loss was simply causing her anger. Of course, this made no difference to the newly dead Naruto. SS Sakura-chan. Naruto's heart broke right then and there. An overwhelming torrent of despair was about to hit him. But he was Uzumaki Naruto. He had been through a lot worse, and he turned out okay. Shit, this is too much. Naruto's attempt to hold back his death and Sakura's rejection failed. Naruto's chain had begun to corrode again. The noise of teeth greedily munching away at the metal drew his attention to it. Huh! Naruto said intelligently as he noticed the corrosion of the chain for the first time. He immediately pulled on it, but the pain was unbearable, and it only seemed to hasten the process. 30 seconds later, and the chain was halfway gone. SS shit, and no, I have to stop this thing, Naruto thought as he started choking. He gasped for breath, coughing and wheezing as his lungs continued to scream, no matter how much air he gulped. Naruto fell to his knees and then saved. Naruto remained to his knees, still gasping for air. He had finally gotten the chain under control, but the chain's action was bothering him. What the hell kind of chain tries to eat itself? And why was it here in the first place? The chain was now 2/3 of the way gone, but it didn't seem like it was going to eat itself again. Naruto frowned. He had finally gotten over his previous depression, and was starting to look at the bigger picture. What was going to happen now? Was he doomed to forever wander the earth as a wandering soul? Was he being punished by God? Or was this a regular occurrence? And how did the chain fit into the equation? More and more questions exploded into Naruto's head, and he was graced with no answers. I'll never get anywhere like this, he said out loud. I suppose I'll head back to the village for now. He shakily climbed to his feet, and vaguely wondered what good going to the village would do. He stared out at the massive wreck that was once Konoha, and began to walk toward it. Naruto had just begun his short afterlife of being a plus. D died? Spluttered out Lee. That can't be true, Sakura-san. Tell me it isn't true, screamed Lee. It's true, Lee. He died from chakra exhaustion, Sakura said quietly. Chakra exhaustion? Asked Neji. Naruto died from something like that? How? Asked Neji. I don't know, said Sakura meekly, her anger finally subsiding into depressed sobs. Maybe he just overdid it like he always does. I swear, he's always such a pain. Sakura smiled sadly, her racking sobs overcoming her speech. Hinata broke down again beside Sakura, her lavender eyes pouring with tears. Why did he have to die? Why was it always him? Sakura blinked before thinking. Just where did Pain go? She had come to the conclusion beforehand that with his target dead, he had retreated. But now she was having second thoughts. Well, the best thing we can do now is bring Naruto's body back to the village, said Sakura. She motioned to Lee and Tenten, who moved to pick up Naruto. Neji, while restraining his suicidal cousin, lead her back to the village. By this point in time, Naruto was now wandering mindlessly through the remainder of the village. His eyes were not focused on any particular thing, but rather just taking in all he could at once. He paused, and then started to stare at one of the only still standing structures left in the entire village. The Hokage Monument. He had once dreamed of getting his face up there along with the rest of them, but that was nothing more than an empty dream now. Meanwhile, Naruto's friends had now made their way back into the village, carrying his corpse. He felt an abrupt surge of anger at them. He didn't know why. It wasn't like he occupied the body anymore. That particular anger faded away when he saw Hinata being led by Neji, bawling her eyes out. It must have been tough, proclaiming your love to someone only to have them die. By that time, the rest of his friends had come up to ask what had happened. The shock and disappointment on their faces was one of the worst things Naruto could see at that moment. He turned away from them in shame, as if he were still visible to them. Geez, what happened? How could Naruto lose? Yelled Kiba, when the now Konoha 10 had congregated in the village to discuss their predicament. Kiba himself was both sad and angry at the deceased blonde. Akamaru yipped in agreement at his side. Kiba! Naruto was capable of taking on Pain, who could take on the entire village. And thanks to him, Pain cannot attack the village anymore. Shouldn't Naruto's effort count for something? Argued Chuji. Naruto smiled at the thought that Chuji was defending him. That is correct, stated Shino. We should not slander our deceased comrade's efforts over something as trivial as losing. Another smile from Naruto off to the side. But he left the village to gain power to take on Pain. He shouldn't have died. He should be right here with us. Kiba, whispered Naruto. While he usually fought with Kiba a lot, it wasn't pleasant to hear those things. Ino happened to join the conversation at that point. Maybe his death meant it was all he could do, she said sadly. Don't be disrespectful toward Naruto Keien, yelled Lee in anger. Even in mourning, Lee was always hearty. Ino glared at him. And were you being respectful when you just handed him off to the ANBU just like that? Naruto stiffened. They gave his body to who? The ANBU specialized in assassination and torture, not burial rites or anything of the matter. Unless they were just bringing his body to the morgue, they couldn't be doing anything pleasant. Naruto looked at his friends one last time. He bowed his head in what looked like a half-hearted apology, before he turned to the village. The ANBU were a top priority for him. A few minutes later, Naruto floated through what was left of the ANBU headquarters. For the first time since he died, Naruto grinned. He had found one of the advantages to being a ghost. It was something, at least. But that grin faded when he saw that there was no one in the entire building. For the next hour, Naruto wandered around the rubble of the HQ looking for anything that might resemble his body. While he was sifting through some rubble near the western wall, he heard what appeared to be a squad of ANBU entering. "So they're taking his body where?" asked one of the male members. Naruto's ears perked up as he inched closer to them to listen. "Well, apparently Danzo wants his body, so the new units took it. What that man wants with the demon's corpse is beyond me," replied the squad captain. Naruto ignored the poison the captain put in his words. The demon was obviously him, but what did Danzo want with him? Shouldn't Bachan be stopping this? Naruto grit his teeth. Unknown to most, Naruto had met Sai's superior several times throughout his life. He was originally one of the many council members to propose his execution, but that morphed into wanting Naruto for the organization. He had approached Naruto several times when he was a child, hoping to sway Naruto's opinion. At first, he had used the hatred of the villagers to try and control him, but eventually these turned into outright threats towards Naruto. If it wasn't for the intervention for the Sandaime, he probably would have been part of the organization a long time ago. Whatever Danzo wanted with his body couldn't be good. But Naruto didn't even know where Danzo was. How was he supposed to find him? The Godame is in a coma. No one knows when she'll wake up, if ever. I hear that the daimyo is going to make him the Rokodame Hokage. It was like a rock dropped itself into Naruto's stomach. Bachan is in a coma, Bachan is in a coma, Naruto repeated over and over again. But Danzo was becoming the Hokage. If he knew anything about that man, it would be that he was the polar opposite to the Sandaime, and if he played his cards right, he would reduce Konoha and the Hai no Kuni to a totalitarian dictatorship, with himself in control. Naruto clenched his fists. As a spirit, there was nothing he could do now. It was painfully tempting to just walk right up to Danzo and put a knife in his skull, but he didn't know if that would work. Naruto slumped against the wall. If he were still alive, he would be screaming about how he'd do something to stop Danzo, and then he's proclaimed that he would be the one to be Hokage, and how he would save Sasuke, but now he was dead. None of those things. Becoming Hokage, saving Sasuke. They didn't matter anymore. Naruto stopped his train of thought. Tsunade had been very lenient on Sasuke's retrieval, but now that she was out of commission, Danzo would. No, Naruto told himself. I'm dead. Sasuke doesn't matter anymore. But I can't just let that guy become the Hokage like that. I have to do something. Naruto, for the first time since he had died, had found a goal to work with. Maybe there was something that he could do in death, after all. 2 weeks later, and Naruto had tried everything. He had screamed himself hoarse at the people of Konoha, and he had even attacked Danzo himself. Only to find that his words couldn't be heard by living people and he just passed right through Danzo. All his skills and all his hard work to get those skills had come crashing down on him in an instant, as he found out. What was worse, that he seemed to be getting weaker over time. The chain had progressed at a slow, but noticeable corrosion, but only one chain link had disappeared over the last 2 weeks. Naruto had gone to just wandering almost zombie-like throughout the center of the ruined village. He didn't need to eat, that at least was a little reassuring. A dark, cloudy veil had settled itself over the village, something rare in the Hai no Kuni. The weather had cooled down immensely, and a biting wind coupled with rain pelted the repair workers. It was ironic. The unusual weather had hit Konoha on the same day as Danzo's initiation. It was as if the world itself was in stark protest to the tyranny about to take place. Naruto was there during Danzo's initiation, lurking in the shadows as he saw the absolute worst possible choice become Hokage. Overall, Danzo's initiation hadn't been all that similar to Tsunade's. The ruined village reflected the opinions of the shinobi, who looked that they had just eaten something bitter. Danzo was flanked by the still-standing Hokage monument, clothed in the full mantle of the Hokage, making him look quite intimidating and powerful. The civilians, however, not knowing of Danza's history, were holding him in high praise. Their public opinion of him had soared in recent years, and they were all too eager to make him Hokage. Danza looked down on the village. His village would be a more accurate term. He smirked, before raising a gnarled hand to take off his hat. I am the Rokudaime Hokage. I will now govern the hidden village of Konoha, Danza declared to the crowd. The civilians erupted into cheers, and even some of the shinobi softened as Danza gave his proclamation. There was something about his speech that seemed sincere. Inu Tora? Let me hear the progress on that experiment, said Danza from his open office. It had been around a month since Danza had taken the mantle of Hokage, and repairs were now underway in the village of Konoha. Although the village was nothing compared to its former glory, they have managed to set up a few small buildings, and were well underway towards a new Hokage tower. Right now, 2A and B were reporting in on the progress of some experiment. Yes, it seems as though the Jinchuriki's body has left trace amounts of the Kyuubi's chakra. The beast itself has clearly died. How we can utilize this chakra has yet to be seen, declared Inu. Danza nodded. Yes, I would imagine that the ability to harness that chakra would be a difficult feat, but surely there is some way to use it properly. We have already performed a number of experiments. It appears that the chakra reacts violently with its host, causing an almost instantaneous death to the user, continued Tora. That shows just how powerful the fox's chakra actually is. It took all of the masterful seal knowledge of the Yondaime to prevent the Kyuubi's chakra from harming the boy. Danza clutched the end of his makeshift desk firmly. He narrowed his eyes, showing a strong hatred for something long past. Oh, how he'll show them. He'd show every one of them. While the village leader planned in his office, the village of Konoha was in a happy mood. Repairs were well underway, and with the new Hokage instituted, the village would be back on its feet in no time. Sakura smiled lightly as she wandered around the area. She didn't believe that Konoha was capable of recovering at such an alarming rate. Stands for businesses had appeared, and even some small buildings had begun to pop up. The smells of familiar food stood out, and the laughing of children pervaded the village as they played. All in all, it looked like a Konoha without its buildings, and nothing less. Seeing such a remarkable recovery after such a devastating attack made Sakura thoroughly convinced that her beloved village would never fall. Yes, Konohagakure would never fall. The will of fire burned too strongly for that to happen. They were the strongest village in the world, and would never fall. Hey! Sakura! Sakura was torn from her patriotic thoughts by a sudden shout. The blonde Yamanaka heiress was standing a distance away, and was waving at the pink-haired Chunin. Ino? The Yamanaka began to move towards her, a smile lighting her face. How've you been? She asked. Sakura smiled widely. Very good, but with all these recent missions I've had to take, I feel like I will work myself to death. Ino laughed loudly. I hear that. But surely the village has come a long way thanks to those missions. I must say, our new Hokage is really something. Even Chunins like ourselves have heard nothing but bad things about him before, but he's done such a good job. Sakura frowned substantially. She remembered that Ino didn't know anything about Danzu or his past actions. She paused, deciding to keep her knowledge of Danzu a secret. I heard he's making a big announcement tomorrow afternoon. Anyone Chunin and above has been scheduled to hear it, she said. Is that right? Well, I'm sure whatever it is, I'm sure it will be beneficial to Konoha. So I guess I'll see you at the meeting tomorrow. That's all I needed to talk to you about. Ino waved goodbye, leaving Sakura to think by herself. Never fall. 1.5 months of this. Naruto was damn close to losing his mind. His precious village had fallen to a tyrant, and he never even found out what Danzu wanted with his body. Hell, right now he even had trouble walking. Today was the day the damned mummy, as Naruto so aptly named him, gave his stupid-ass speech about something useless to the entire village. Not that Naruto actually cared about anything that bastard did anymore. Ever since his death, Naruto had astonished himself by his lack of concern towards the village. It could have well been that he had tried to convince himself that this was just some horrible dream. That he was asleep in his apartment. The village was still standing, Danza wasn't Hokage, and most importantly, that he wasn't dead. He looked up from his position, and saw that Danza had made himself visible over the railway. A good-sized crowd had gathered around the Hokage monument. Naruto noted that he was making an announcement over the entire village. It must have been something big then, if he was making this announcement on top of the Hokage Tower. Danza cleared his throat. Citizens of Konohagakure no Sato. Today, we have made a remarkable discovery. This discovery will make the village of Konoha roar throughout the world, as the world's top military power. No more will we be threatened by the barbarians of Iwa, Kiri, and Kumo, and not even the organization of Akatsuki will be able to faze us. Amazed voices washed throughout the crowd from both ninja and civilian alike. What their beloved Hokage was saying seemed too good to be true. With the death of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, Uzumaki Naruto, our researchers have managed to find residual amounts of the beast's chakra left inside the body. We have experimented diligently on the body and have managed a way to isolate the chakra. With this, our own shinobi are now capable of wielding a fraction of the chakra of the Kyuubi no Yuko. A stunned silence permeated the area. Slowly, a few protesting voices rose, gradually becoming a torrent of rioting villagers. The villagers, of course, didn't understand the situation, and were outraged that the source of their hatred still existed. For the shinobi, it was a different story. They, of course, understood the capabilities of such power. As such, they were in full support of their Hokage. They cheered, yelling praises and compliments at him. Naruto looked around, and his heart fell. His friends, Kiba, Shikamaru, Chuji, Ino, Lee, Niji, Sai, and the rest of them, stood silent. Some of them seemed too ashamed to say anything. While they weren't in support of the decision, they weren't exactly vocal in protesting it. Naruto stood still, his hands clenched at his sides. Those bastards. Those bastards. They. Naruto couldn't finish his sentence. He attempted to think of Iruka-sensei and the rest of his precious people, and thought of the consequences of revenge. But no, it was too true. An insane surge of hatred for Konoha, even larger than the hate he held in his earlier life, began to emerge. As Naruto's rage reached its peak, the chain on his chest began to erode for the first time in weeks. This time, Naruto paid it no mind, and actually embraced the feeling. He never knew how intoxicating it was. The teeth corroded away the last of the chain, and Naruto's rage disappeared, in exchange for immense pain, as well as a deep hunger. What's happening? Screamed Naruto, as he fell to his knees. The former ninja hissed and roared as a hole began to open up over his heart where the chain once was. Gradually it increased in size until it was as large as a basketball. Naruto desperately gasped for air, while clutching his head with his hands. He bucked and thrashed around like a crazed lunatic, and he glowed with a soft white energy. In spite of this, Naruto was actually going through an excruciating experience, as he began to mutate more. Eventually, his human body disintegrated. Around 300 feet away, Naruto's body reformed. The only thing left unchanged was his head, but that was going to go too. Naruto's eyes rolled to the back of his head, as he stood painfully straight. White material burst forth from his eyes and mouth, hovering in the air for a minute, before they began to cover his face. The white material hardened, revealing a canine-like mask. From the two eye holes, two evil-looking black and yellow eyes appeared. The beast roared, letting out an amazing shockwave that reverberated all over Konoha. If you looked at Hosoke Masaru, all you would see is the plainest, most boring, and most average Shinigami in Soul Society, and this is right on the dot. An unseated Shinigami, Masaru was always looking for a seat in the Godai 13's 10th Division. Luckily for him, he was one of the Shinigami sent to patrol the elemental countries. Considering the recent attack of pain, he would be the one to purify every plus in Konoha, an achievement that would surely receive praise. Right now, he was giving consult to one Hatake Kakashi, who had apparently died in the attack. Masaru had to admit, he was impressed with the man's power. Freshly dead, and his Ryatsu reading was already that of a seated officer. If the guy became a Shinigami, he could easily become a vice captain. But, as the Shinigami noted, Hatake seemed very confused. He was all too aware he was dead, of course, but he seemed to believe he was under attack, considering he had a kunai poised for attack. Whoa, easy there. I'm not here to attack you. Masaru held up free hand in a compromising gesture. Kakashi wasn't convinced, and remained fully focused on the glimmering blade that was currently clutched in Masaru's hand. Then why have you drawn your katana if you don't mean to attack me? Asked Kakashi. Even if he already knew that he was dead, the man was still a shinobi, and was able to deal with this situation in a very level-headed manner. The Shinigami scratched his head. This would take a while to explain. Not many souls had the audacity to attack a Shinigami. Usually it was just locate the soul, quickly give it a kanso, and then move on to the next one. A simple process, and there was no time for chit-chat in between. First of all, I must tell you that I am a Shinigami, said Masaru cautiously. He didn't know why he would start out with that. Any human in their right mind was unlikely to believe him. Kakashi narrowed his eyes. What kind of lie is this? He asked. Masaru rubbed his temples. Whether you believe me or not, the fact remains that you have died, and have nothing left for you if you remain here. You can't stay here forever, so I'm here to escort you to Soul Society. Kakashi continued to look skeptical. What is this Soul Society place? And what does that have to do with a sword? I've never heard of any afterlife where the soul is transported via a sword. Masaru held up a finger. First of all, Soul Society is what you people call heaven. You get sent there by a kanso, which involves hitting the forehead with the back of this here zanpakuto. Kakashi relaxed slightly, but still didn't drop his guard completely. He said, still not believing the story. You mentioned that I couldn't stay here forever. What did you mean by that? Why should I have to leave my village? Because if you stay here too long you'll eventually turn into a whole dash. While Masaru was talking, he was cut off mid-sentence by a guttural roar and a burst of ryatsu. The Shinigami's heightened senses focused in on the source, and he bit his bottom. Damn it! A hollow. Now! He screamed. Acting quickly, he performed the kanso before Kakashi had any time to react, a surprisingly fast action, and sprinted to the source of the hollow that had just been born. Bleary from his transformation, Naruto still stood despite of himself. What was he doing again? Oh yeah, Danza had dropped the bomb on all of Konoha, and all those years of hard work went down the drain. With resumed anger and hate, Naruto slashed a claw at the nearest object, and noted for the first time that his hand was different. Wait, claw? Naruto flexed the canine-like claw in front of his face. What? Roared Naruto. His eyes washed themselves over his new body, and the differences between it and his human body were truly staggering. He was a four-legged creature, about 8 feet in total. His body was much bulkier than he was as a human, with his entire torso covered in a coarse, red fur. On a face was a mask that was very canine in appearance, with 2 fox ear projections coming out of both sides, and completely non-human teeth. There were 2 parallel red markings that began at his cheeks, and then ran all the way up to curl around his forehead, taking a stop at each of his eyes. Out of his backside sprouted a single tail. There was something off about this tail though. It was extremely light, almost like there was no substance inside of it. It seemed almost hollow. Being distracted and flipping out for the moment, Naruto barely had time to register the sword that was about to crash into his mask. He felt the sharp edge just touch his mask, and he forced himself to clumsily move out of the way. Who the hell are you? Asked Naruto, sneering at the Shinigami. An insane rage that Naruto didn't believe himself capable of surged through him, as the asshole had the gall to laugh. You must be a new hollow if you're asking me such a question. I don't know if I could get any luckier, getting only 1 greenhorn hollow in all this mess here. But I suppose I should answer your question. My name's Hosokeya Masaru, Shinigami of the 10th Division. Naruto tilted his head, but otherwise didn't question the odd title in which Masaru addressed himself. So tell me, Shinigami, why the hell did you just attack me? Masaru grinned cheekily. Now that question. I have no reason to answer you. Masaru wasted no time in pressing his attack on the new hollow. He quickly drew his Zanpakuto, immediately going for a vertical slash on Naruto's mask. The hollow retaliated, moving his head out of the way, and swiped his hand sideways, catching the Shinigami off guard. His large claw grabbed the Shinigami's face, and he then threw him with all the force he could muster. Masaru crashed into a building, laying prone for a few seconds before he shakily rose to his feet. There was no longer any sort of grin on his face. Naruto looked at him, and realized something. This Shinigami was likely used to things just going his way. If something unexpected happened, he would have no way to react to it. Masaru roared at the hollow, the grip on his Zanpakuto tightening as he recklessly swung at the hollow, who dodged all the swings. Then Masaru saw a second claw crash into him, sending him careening away. This is a new hollow. His combat abilities and his Ryatsu are unreal. Naruto gave him no time to retaliate this time. With a speed unmatched by his former ninja self, he was already bearing down upon the wounded Shinigami. Ruthlessly, he brought down his claw yet again. The abused Shinigami gave a grunt of pain, before a tail wrapped around his midsection, hoisting him up to Naruto's face. Naruto eyed him thoughtfully, as if contemplating what to do him. After what seemed like ages, Naruto spoke. Now you're going to explain to me nice and slow what's going on here. So Masaru wove the same yarn he used on Kakashi. Almost like a skilled actor, he explained the afterlife fluidly, attempting to buy as much time as possible. So I'm a hollow? Masaru nodded. And hollows eat humans? Masaru nodded. And Shinigami from this Soul Society place come here to kill hollows? Masaru nodded again. Okay, I think I get the gist of what you're saying, Shinigami. Naruto loosened the grip on the Shinigami, which was probably a foolish move on his part. Masaru got up suddenly, a look of pure rage on his face. Yeah, but it's not gonna help you much, hollow. He roared, as he used the last of his strength to swing at Naruto. Naruto tightened the grip on Masaru, forcing the Zanpakuto from his hand. It hit the ground with a clang, the last hope of Masaru now gone. You monster! Let me go this instant. I'll kill you! I'll kill all hollows. All hollows are evil, they must be purified. Slash! Masaru's hysterical ramblings were cut short as Naruto took his claws and effortlessly slit the Shinigami's throat. The head fell limp, hanging in front of the body uselessly. Naruto loosened his tail and allowed the corpse to fall to the ground with a heavy thud. He looked at the corpse with a mixture of anger and hunger, the latter of which Naruto didn't expect to come over. An urge was poking at him in the back of his mind, and he couldn't resist. He tore into the Shinigami's flesh, devouring the body with a surprising amount of relish. When he finished, Naruto was feeling happier. The taste of that Shinigami was delicious. It was like a weight that had followed him since he died had been lifted. Perhaps this afterlife wasn't so bad after all. He looked back on Konoha, a great hatred being formed in his gut. The villagers and Danzu. Even his former friends were on there for their support of Danzu's decision. But first, there was one person who trumped all of them. Konoha could wait for the time being. It wasn't going anywhere. But there was one person who was first on his hit list. Chapter 2, El Obstaculo. Hollows are former human souls that are said to have lost their hearts to despair, or simply have spent too much time as a plus, becoming a creature only seen in a twisted nightmare. Most hollows have an extreme hunger for souls of both Shinigami and humans, to fill the void that was created by their loss of a heart. Before that, however, they will often seek out and eat the one they have loved, or the one they have had a strong obsession with during their lives. Tetsu no Kuni. This snow-covered country is considered the most secure place in the ninja world, as it has remained neutral for all of the shinobi world wars. It is here that the meeting place of the strongest shinobi in the world, the 5 Kages, takes place. Today, there would be two main threats that would enter this place. The first, comprising of Akatsuki, would cause quite the uproar, specifically due to the stunt of Uchiha Sasuke and his team, as well as the declaration of a fourth shinobi world war. The second would continue to go completely unknown. A perpetual cold inhabited the country, making for an extremely fierce climate. The biting cold made the wilderness of the country a bleak, depressing wasteland where life could be snuffed out in an instant. Not that that's the case for one particular hollow. A strange mountain, looking like three wolf heads, loomed overhead. Every ninja currently in the country was congregating to this spot. This was Tetsuno Kuni. Naruto himself was also heading towards this spot, his bestial body going unnoticed by the shinobi. Ever since he had killed that Shinigami, his hunger had increased. But no, not hunger for just any soul. To fill the void in his heart, he must devour this particular soul without fail. Naruto snarled. He was close. Something Naruto had noticed over the past few days was his subconscious ability to roughly sense a person's aura, as he called it. Of course, Naruto didn't know the formal name for it just yet, nor was it as concentrated as one would like it to be. However, he did manage to pick out 7 different Ryatsu signatures. Although not nearly as strong as that Shinigami's, they stood out as stronger than the rest of the people present. For a human, there were only a select few that had this much spiritual pressure, so Naruto was sure that his target was one of them. Going from the looks of things, it seemed that there was a large conflict going on at the summit of this mountain. He felt one of the auras flee, the others too busy with fighting to notice. His tail bristled. They all seemed very tasty at the moment, but there was only one that really mattered. The fleeing aura was getting farther away by the time Naruto reached the base of the mountain. The quadrupedal hollow raised a paw up and sank it into the face of the rock. It yielded surprisingly easily under the razor-sharp claws, and Naruto was able to haul himself smoothly up the mountain, using all 4 of his claws as leverage. And so, today was the day that a hollow snuck effortlessly into the Tetsuno Kuni. While Naruto was sneaking into the Kage meeting, a group of 5 Shinigami were standing over the mutilated corpse of Hosoke and Masaru, scrutinizing their dead comrade carefully. Like Masaru, they were from the 10th Division, even though their experience far outweighed the dead new recruit. Around a week ago, Masaru had been dispatched to the real world to perform Kanso on the souls that were killed during Pain's attack, something that most of the members of the 10th Division were against. This particular group of Shinigami were among them. Around 5 days after Masaru's trip to the real world, the 10th Division discovered via Hell Butterfly that he had been killed by a hollow. Masaru may have been a new recruit, but even he shouldn't have been killed by a hollow that was barely an hour old. The leader, a man with black hair pulled into a rat tail, stood at the front. He squatted down low, looking at the lacerations and torn flesh that adorned Masaru's body. Looks like the hollow really did a number on him. It's not surprising that he would fall in battle. That was the exact reason why we were so against him coming to the real world. One of the Shinigami, a brown-haired one to the right of him, piped up. But considering the sloppy way the hollow ate him, it seemed that it wasn't even an hour old at the time. The leader nodded his agreement. That certainly seems to be the case. It's probably because of the location. Let's face it, everyone here is prepped for combat. We're lucky that a hollow hasn't come out of this place in a long time. 2 of the Shinigami looked at each other, their perturbed expressions enough to convey what they were thinking. One of them was brave enough to voice his opinion. What does this mean? One of 2 things. Either Masaru was too weak to kill this fresh hollow, something I deem unlikely. Or we've got ourselves a potentially dangerous hollow on our hands, the leader stated grimly. The Shinigami tensed. Never had they been so troubled before on a mission. It looked like he was too late. The Kage summit was in shambles. Many people, both samurai and ninja alike, lay dead on the ground from the attack. However, the Kaze, Mizu, Tsuchi, and Reikage were still up and standing. They appeared to surveying the area. Naruto scowled. Out of the 7 heavy auras previously here, his target was not one of the 4 that remained. He slashed at a nearby pile of rubble in frustration, making the 4 Kages look at it in confusion. He was beginning to get impatient. The hollow let out a deep breath. He needed to be calm if he ever wanted to succeed. Naruto opened up his senses again. 2 of the 3 remaining auras were moving rapidly away from the summit, one appearing to chase after the other. The last one seemed to be at a standstill farther from here. Naruto's decision was obvious. There was a greater chance of finding his target in the 2 moving auras. Some distance away, the auras that were Sasuke and Danzo had stopped to duke it out in a battle of Sharingan, with Sasuke struggling with Danzo's Izanagi. However, Danzo currently only had 5 Sharingan eyes left on his body, the Izanagi causing most of them to shut. Kuchios no Jutsu. A giant puff of smoke emerged from the jutsu, before revealing an extremely large tapir-like animal, the Baku, too, which compensated for the loss of Sharingans. The large chimera opened its maw, and proceeded to suck in a huge amount of air, taking various debris with it. Danzo used this opportunity to shun behind Sasuke, who was disoriented from the attack. Futon, Shinkarenpa 3. Danzo opened his mouth, and expelled a dozen wind blades, which plowed into Sasuke's Susanoo, causing it to bend back. However, while Danzo was dealing with Susanoo, Sasuke had taken the opportunity to send a fireball straight into the Baku's mouth. Naruto was starting to get excited. His instincts as a hollow were telling him that a great battle was taking place up ahead. He smirked, even if it looked more like a sneer than a smirk. He would likely devour the both of them, even if one of them wasn't his target. It wasn't long now. He could see them up ahead. The old fool who was named the 6th Hokage was one of them, he noticed, and the other was. Naruto stopped. A feeling of intense euphoria filled him, and he lost what little self-control he had left. The battle was over. Sasuke had used a weak genjutsu to trick Danzo, who now lay on the ground, all of the Sharingan eyes on his arm closed. Sasuke stood over him, glaring at him hatefully. This is a battle of eyes. Don't mess with the Uchiha, declared Sasuke. Sasuke glared deeper, but after a few seconds an oppressive force drew Sasuke's attention from Danzo, and a hissing noise sounded in his ear. Don't mess with the Uchihas? A deep, mocking voice resonated throughout the entire area. As the voice said that, Sasuke turned around so fast it looked like his neck would snap. Madara and the fallen Danzo had noticed it too, yet Karen just stood around, an ignorant look on her face. Sorry Sasuke, but it looks like this time I'm going to have to mess with the Uchihas. The voice called out again. This statement only served to make Sasuke even angrier. Who are you? Show yourself. Sasuke immediately regretted his outburst. For the thing did in fact show itself. It was a blur at first, and Sasuke had to strain to see it, even with his Sharingan. But the longer he looked at it, the clearer a shape formed. It was 8 feet from head to tail, and vaguely resembled a fox. But it more accurately represented a sick, twisted nightmare of a creature. It seemed to be just standing over there, hunched slightly as it faced their direction. Its soulless black and yellow eyes peered at Sasuke in particular. The targeted human suppressed a shudder at the sight of the thing, but he held his ground. He tensed, lowering himself into his standard taijutsu stance. It had been a long time since anything had ever made him this nervous. That Sharingan of yours seems to be the reason you can see me, the creature mused. A thoughtful look set itself upon its face. But that's fine, this will make it far more satisfying when I eat you. A malicious grin replaced the thoughtful look. Sasuke's eye widened. That last statement had taken creepy to a whole new level. Eat me? He asked. That's right, Sasuke, eat you. You, the one who I've been hunting for quite some time now. But now's not the time to be talking. I've been waiting for this moment forever. At this point in time, Sasuke had had quite enough of this creature's nonsense. It was just spouting out garbage, but how did it know whether it was capable of eating him? Snapping out of his trance, he rushed towards the hollow in order to find out. Naruto grinned at the approach. To a human, it was an insanely high-level taijutsu. But to a hollow, it was nothing special, and nothing he couldn't avoid. Sasuke's punch snapped forward, his right fist aiming for the hollow's strange mask. Naruto just stood there, taking the blow head-on. Sasuke felt his hand make contact with a particularly hard material, and it didn't even feel like he caused any damage. Naruto's thick skin pulled through for him, as it easily absorbed the force of the impact. The hollow then shot out his left claw, catching Sasuke around the neck. His tail shot up like a snake, and he slammed it into the Uchiha, sending him flying through the air. As Sasuke was falling, Naruto jumped into the air, grabbed his head, and slammed him point blank into a nearby rock. Kawarimi, Naruto hissed, as nothing remained but a heavily splintered log. The thought of that annoying jutsu made his blood boil. Whatever the case, Sasuke had barely escaped his assault. When he reappeared, he still looked a little ragged. "You know, Sasuke, I always thought you would put up more of a fight." Sasuke jumped at the creature's usage of his name, and he voiced his shock quite soundly. "How do you know my name?" he asked. "Oh, I'm hurt, Sasuke. Here's a hint. Who's the one who's been hunting after you for the past 3 years, Databayo?" said Naruto in a mocking voice. The last word was purposely altered so it sounded just like Naruto as a 12-year-old. Sasuke's eyes widened. "And Naruto?" "On the mark." What the hell happened to you?" Naruto sighed. "Oh, the usual. Fighting Akatsuki, dying, having my friends betray me, having that old scumbag over their experiment on my corpse." The Hollow took the time to glare over at the wounded Danzu. The man seemed at a loss for words in front of this monstrosity. "Why you?" "Save it, Danzu. I'll deal with you in due time. But first," he glanced back at Sasuke, "I have to deal with my biggest mistake." By now, Sasuke was ready for round 2. "Fine then, Naruto. We shall settle things here." Despite his exhausted state, he activated the Manjikyu Sharingan. "And I will show you not to mess with the Uchihas." At that point, all hell broke loose. Madara, for all this time, had never taken any action throughout this entire ordeal. On one hand, he was perturbed by the appearance of this strange creature, but because of all his great experience and age, remained relatively calm throughout the situation. What really got him, though, was the fact that this thing was the newly deceased Kyuubi Jinchuriki. He didn't know what the hell had happened, but apparently he could only see it through the use of his Sharingan. That would explain why the girl over there didn't know what was going on. The death of the boy had come as a large shock to the elder Uchiha. He had trusted Nagato to be able to bring him back alive. When the fake Akatsuki leader showed his face again, he informed Madara that the Kyuubi Jinchuriki had died. That threw one hell of a wrench in his plans. He had had to ignore that for the time being. He'd deal with that problem when the time came. So, he went on ahead with his plan to infiltrate the Kage summit. But as it turns out, the Kyuubi boy was much bigger of a surprise than he thought. The Akatsuki leader turned his attention back to Sasuke. Things were getting bad. He was getting worn down. Everything he tried was being shrugged off like it was nothing. He knew that the Kyuubi Jinchuriki had changed into a monster, but this much of a power difference was absurd. "Amaterasu!" Sasuke screamed, trying a new technique. He bled profusely from the Manjikyu, but black flames did indeed sprout up around the area, including Naruto. The Amaterasu flames, capable of burning through anything. No opponent could survive this technique, at least, no human opponent. The flames were indeed on Naruto, but seeing as they were made from chakra, not Ryatsu, they had no effect on the Hollow's tough skin. Naruto was able to shrug off the flames like they were nothing. "This is the so-called Amaterasu?" said Naruto mockingly. "I must say, Sasuke, I'm disappointed. I thought you were stronger than this." A flare of rage customary to Sasuke bubbled up inside him. "Shut up, Naruto. I am stronger than you, and always have been. Who's the one who's failed to catch me up until now?" Sasuke glared up into the currently apathetic yellow eyes of Naruto, who started to notice the real world fading, and an illusionary world forming. It was a very strange world. The normal laws of physics didn't seem to apply here. Everything was a different color than what it should have been. A sinister chuckle reverberated throughout the entire world. "Finally, I'm able to achieve Tsukuyomi. You should be grateful, Naruto, since you're the first opponent I've ever fully used this on." From the floor, a despicable liquid emerged. It oozed out of the illusionary ground at a rate slower than that of molasses. Pretty soon, a small puddle had formed, which began to slowly take a human shape. As it was happening, more and more puddles began appearing all over the illusion, creating dozens of silhouettes. Sasuke's Tsukuyomi was different than that of Itachi's. For one thing, while Itachi's exuded a cold, apathetic aura, Sasuke's created a malicious aura. one that wanted to cause their victim to go through as much pain as inhumanely possible. The illusions of Sasuke creeped slowly towards Naruto, whose large frame was unmoving. This unnerved the real Sasuke slightly. Naruto didn't seem to be frozen in fear or shock. He just seemed to be unmoving. Naruto wanted nothing more than to grin at the moment Sasuke cast his genjutsu. He restrained himself, however, as that would give him away. The Hollow didn't want that. No, not at all. He was a predator, and one who liked to mess with his prey, making them think that they had any chance at all of victory. However, he did not truly know why the genjutsu was not affecting him. Indeed, if you looked from Naruto's perspective, all you would see is the last Uchiha do some silly-looking impressions, and not really looking that intimidating at all. Especially to an 8-foot-tall monster. In truth, though, the way genjutsu works is that it attacks the chakra flow in the brain, causing the victim's senses to be distorted into the various images that the genjutsu provides. Naruto, who is dead, has no chakra, and thus, there is no way for him to be manipulated. Nonetheless, Sasuke thought that his target was under genjutsu, and began to move forward. Why waste the chance to finish off his opponent while he was distracted? Sasuke reached behind his back and pulled out his Kusanagi, and smoothly yet cautiously approached the Hollow. Naruto resisted the urge to face-bomb. He had now figured it out. The Uchiha apparently had tried a genjutsu, but something was making it so it was ineffective. Sasuke had confidence in his genjutsu though, seeing as the Uchiha had just rushed him at point blank. But still, why waste this opportunity? The cunning Hollow held his face down, feigning some kind of torture. He emitted various levels of screams and spasms, giving his opponent the impression that the genjutsu was effective. The Uchiha relished in this, fully convinced of his success. Pathetic. With all that talk earlier, you still fell to an Uchiha's genjutsu. I guess the Dobe's personalities do not change, even if their bodies do. Sasuke walked slowly toward the Hollow, kneeling down when he got there. The Uchiha breathed on Naruto's head. I'll say it again. Naruto. Don't mess with the Uchihas. He prepared his sword for an attempt to end the Hollow's life. He did not notice the cunning, the malicious smirk on Naruto's face. Faster than the eye can see, a large claw shot out and grasped Sasuke's head. Sasuke, having the full belief that his genjutsu was working, was thoroughly unprepared for the assault. The claw slammed his head brutally into the ground. You are the arrogant one here, Sasuke. You have so much faith in your little genjutsu, now don't you? You walked right in front of me without even thinking of using Kawarimi, Naruto said. Naruto severely tightened his grip on Sasuke's head, causing the Uchiha to scream. And that mistake will cost you your life. Naruto's grin widened, any resemblance of sanity now gone. Oh, how I've been waiting for this moment, Sasuke. It's been almost unbearable. But putting that aside, where should I start? He mulled over, taking glances at Sasuke's head and arms. Naruto rolled his black eyes almost lazily, but didn't loosen his grip on Sasuke's head. Oh, that's right. I wouldn't want to make this too merciful on you, now would I? He asked rhetorically. Sasuke said nothing, but his increased breathing would indicate that he was becoming nervous. Naruto opened his mouth, revealing ludicrously long and sharp canine teeth. He then tore into Sasuke's left arm, devouring everything he could. To Sasuke, it felt like 1,000 cold, miniature knives and chainsaws were grinding into his arm at every possible angle, making it total agony. He screamed in severe pain as his arm was reduced to a lump of scattered bone, skin, and sinew. Naruto looked at his handiwork. He had created a stump out of Sasuke's left arm. The screams were equally satisfying. He looked around, before beginning the same process on Sasuke's other arm. How does it feel, Sasuke? Asked Naruto. Sasuke weakly murmured something incoherent. Naruto put his face close to the Uchiha. What's that, you want more? Sasuke's eyes widened like saucers. Well, I was going to finish it soon. Naruto lied. But now that I think about it, there's no rush. So I guess I can grant your request. Naruto flipped the Uchiha from on his back to on his stomach. A maniacal grin set upon his face as he tore into Sasuke's abdominal area. His bloodlust grew as he ate the Uchiha's flesh, though he held himself back from eating anything vital. Sasuke screamed even more. To him, this was 100 times worse than the treatment of his arm. In fact, now, Sasuke would be willing to give almost anything to have that back. Blood gushed from Sasuke's wound in torrents. It was a miracle that he wasn't dead yet. No, not quite a miracle, but a fine precision. Naruto had purposefully left Sasuke's organs alone, instead opting to create just a heavy flesh wound. Sasuke had now lost the ability to speak. The pain was too great for that. Now, he just wanted it to end. Luckily for him, Naruto was just about to grant him that wish. Just like before, Naruto lunged his open mouth straight ahead, this time going to Sasuke's head. The skin and muscle was breached immediately underneath the powerful incisors. Naruto gave a push, and his eyes, the precious Sharingan eyes, were mashed and eaten as well. No! No! Were the frantic thoughts of the dying Uchiha. His gave one final scream as Naruto began to devour his brain. Sasuke was already dead, but Naruto continued to eat the dead Uchiha's brain, savoring the meal. As soon as he was finished devouring the soul, he felt his power begin to grow. His goal, his was complete. And it didn't take much effort at all. Now, he could focus on other things. When the Hollows has finally buried their obsession, two paths will open for it. The first is the more common path. Once burying their obsession, they lose their intelligence, and simply become mindless creatures bent on finding the most powerful souls to devour. They can, however, regain their intelligence by spending time with more intelligent Hollows. The second path creates a much more dangerous Hollow, one that has retained its intelligence. These are the Hollows that ascend to Mino's status. They share the desire to eat powerful souls, but they are capable of much more complex things. In particular, the ability to hold a grudge. Danzo and Madara were simply stunned. Not only had this thing showed up claiming to be the deceased Konoha pariah, he had also brutalized Sasuke. While Madara was lamenting the loss of his newest subordinate, Danzo was starting to get nervous. He had witnessed Sasuke's death, and even he didn't believe that anything had that much sheer cruelty. This creature simply reeked of it. There was no way that it was Uzumaki Naruto. But putting that aside, Danzo was beginning to fear for his life. What made matters worse was that Madara was just sitting off to the side idly, watching the latest development with a curious mixture of shock and intrigue. Naruto turned to the two old men, his steely gaze falling on Danzo in particular. Without warning, he kicked Sasuke's remains in the air, which landed in front of the injured shinobi. You will take that back to the village. Tell them publicly about just how painful his death. However, if you tell them just what or who killed him, then you will receive the same treatment as him. He motioned at the dead Uchiha. No matter how filthy your soul may taste. Naruto spat out the last part with so much venom that the old Hokage shivered. Danzo was many things, but he was no fool. He knew in an instant that this creature could and would follow up with what he said. Naruto turned his gaze to Madara. The same thing applies to you, Madara. The elder Uchiha said nothing. I've finally kept my promise, he whispered mockingly. In its own bastardized way, he actually sort of had. Even if it meant nothing more than burying his obsession, the promise was fulfilled. He didn't think it would be that easy. He really didn't. Hell, he was almost bored with this turn of events. Turns out the old fool actually went ahead and listened to him. He told Konoha all about the Uchiha's untimely death. Naruto really wished he had a camera. The look on Sakura's face had been priceless. But he had finally kept his promise. Even in death, it would be a cold day in hell when Naruto ever broke a promise. There was now nothing left in the village to burden him anymore. Which means that he could finally be able to go all out on the place. Naruto was currently on the outskirts of the village, looking through the open gates. He sneered. Oh, how he hated this place. Apparently, the Uchiha was being mourned by a good portion of the village, as if he was still a hero. But it wasn't like he could blame them. The majority of the civilians didn't know about Sasuke's plans. But now was the time for action. He had brought back Sasuke, so now he could make Sakura a sobbing heap of depression before he killed her. Yes, she would be the last to die. First, she was torn from her love, and now she will see the rest of the village fall right in front of her. Naruto's tails twitched with excitement. This would be fun. Naruto wasted no time in his exploit. The hollow rushed through the ruined streets of Konoha, thoroughly intent on finishing his job. To prove his point, Naruto sank his powerful teeth into the shoulder of the closest villager. The man screaming in pain, blood gushed from his wound. The villagers around him looked on in shock and confusion as the man was torn limb from limb, and swiftly devoured with no visible source. They looked around, and when another villager was killed in just the same way, fear overcame their reason. Panic. The villagers scattered to and fro in every possible direction, not wanting whatever that had happened to that man to happen to them. The panic increased as 3 more villagers were eaten. Shopkeepers jumped out of their stalls and into the crowds, knocking their merchandise everywhere in a blind attempt to escape. Ninjas were jumping onto the scene, trying to quell the panic as well as attempt to subdue the problem. To Naruto, it was such a beautiful thing. These people would die without even knowing how. And the pathetic ninja would be able to do nothing to stop him. Naruto reared back and roared with laughter. He had never felt so alive. If this was what the afterlife was like, he would have died a long time ago. A whoosh of movement drew Naruto's attention away from his feast, and his laughter stopped. "Whoa, it looks like you're having a blast," came an unfamiliar voice, as a few presences stood directly behind Naruto. There, dressed in their standard black robes, were 5 Shinigami. A standard patrol unit, if you will, but Naruto was quick to notice the arrogant smirks on all of their faces. "Shinigami. It seems I can never get enough of you people. That buddy of yours can attest to that." The leader frowned. "Oh, and what buddy are you talking about?" Naruto put his hand on his cheek, a gesture oddly out of place in the pandemonium. "Oh, let's see, I think his name was Masaru or Muzare, or something like that." The 5 Shinigami tensed, the smirks on their faces dropping to be replaced by looks of anger. This was the hollow that had killed Masaru, as a fresh hollow. It had been 3 weeks since that time, so this hollow may have advanced since then. Naruto opened his eyes wider as a sick grin spread across his face. He was very good. The response came as nothing more than a whisper, but it succeeded in putting the Shinigami even more on edge. One of the Shinigami got bold. "Monster! Die, hollow scum!" The large, bald Shinigami screamed as he brandished his sword and charged Naruto. "Idiot! Don't let him get under your skin!" the leader screamed at the berserk Shinigami. Naruto deftly avoided a sword strike by leaping into the air, and afterwards his tail shot out and attempted to impale the reckless Shinigami. He was alarmed when the Shinigami caught it. Naruto winced as the Shinigami tightened his grip on the tail. "What the hell are you doing?" The Shinigami gave no reply, instead choosing to twirl the tail around his head, which made Naruto spin round and round like a lopsided windmill. The Shinigami let go of his tail, sending Naruto flying into a makeshift house. The villagers paused for a split second to stare in confusion at the damage, but soon went back to their pandemonium. Naruto pushed the rubble off of him and got ready to continue the battle. Another Shinigami appeared in front of him in midair with a slash that Naruto managed to avoid, but not without taking a shallow cut on the torso. Naruto staggered, before following up with a claw swipe, which caught the Shinigami on the face. "Hisao!" The brown-haired Shinigami clutched his face. Being slashed by 8-inch claws had created a deep enough wound for the relatively fragile Shinigami to be incapacitated for a few minutes. The fox flew towards the wounded Shinigami, attempting to do his trademark impale. He almost got his hand lopped off by the leader of the Shinigami. He reared back, and noticed that the remaining 2 Shinigami had joined the fray in an attempt to protect their comrade. 5-on-1. "Doesn't seem very fair now, does it?" mocked Naruto. "Shut up, Hollow! We don't have to be fair against the likes of you!" yelled the bald Shinigami. "Shut your hole, bastard! I wasn't talking to you!" Naruto roared back. He didn't notice that his Ryatsu seemed to increase after that, but the rest of the Shinigami certainly did. Naruto turned to the leader after he was finished berating the bald man. "You seem stronger than the rest of them. What's your name, Shinigami?" 20th seat of the 10th Division, Moriguchi Kichiro. Interesting, that other Shinigami didn't mention anything about Shinigami ranks. Care to elaborate? Kichiro scoffed. I don't think so. That fool of a new recruit may have been so willing to give out information, but don't think it's the same for me. The 20th seat gestured to the remaining 2 Shinigami, the youngest man and the only female. Attack! The other 2 Shinigami rushed at Naruto, providing a distraction for Kichiro. Naruto blocked both Shinigami, but failed to properly react to an incoming Kichiro. He protected his mask in order to minimize the damage, but he was still sent flying back. The hollow skidded along the air, coming to a halt 20 feet away. He was then hit with a heavy punch from the bald Shinigami, which sent him flying to earth, leaving the wounded hollow in a crater. He was lying on his back, with Hisao shakily coming in for the killing blow. Too naive! Naruto shouted, as he shifted to the left, causing Hisao's Zanpakuto to stab into the ground. He whipped his tail around, hitting Hisao in his claw wound. Giving his opponents no time to react, he quickly grasped Hisao's face and began to squeeze. Hisao, who was still trying to pull his Zanpakuto out of the ground, had no chance. He let out a small yell as Naruto tightened his grip. Hisao! Yelled the female of the group. Let of Hisao, you bastard! Screamed Kichiro, as he desperately attempted another attack. He was too late. Crunch! The 4 Shinigami looked on as Hisao's head was crushed easily under the hollow's strong hand. He died instantly as his skull caved in under the pressure, and blood poured from openings in Hisao's head. Naruto shook the blood from his hands. A pathetic Shinigami. Am I correct in assuming that he was the weakest one among you? Said Naruto coldly. The 4 Shinigami screamed in rage, wanted to pulverize this hollow into a bloody pulp. The 4 of them attacked Naruto at the same time, effectively catching the hollow off guard. And this time, there was rage fueling their attacks. Naruto had barely managed to stop a slash from the female Shinigami, when he was attacked by Kichiro. The hollow winced, and then screamed as he was slashed through the middle. He fell backwards in a heap. The wound was deep. Naruto huffed and puffed. They had really done a number on him before that, and now they had to throw in a huge slash. The 4 Shinigami were now towering over the fallen hollow. The rage on their faces faded to cold apathy. You're finished, Hollow, said Kichiro quietly. Naruto's eyes widened in rage at the statement. No! I can't let it end here. I have to destroy Konoha. I have to. I won't let little shits like you get in my way. The Shinigami took a wary step back. Naruto's rage was allowing his Ryatsu to pour out of his body, stronger than before. Rage was fueling him similarly to determination when he was alive. But this time, the combat abilities and maliciousness was greater. The hollow rushed the 4 Shinigami blindly, shrieking in rage. The 3 non-seated Shinigami barely managed to avoid the attack, but Kichiro got a lucky stab in the ribs to the fox. Naruto fell to his knees, breathing even heavier than before. He was getting too wounded, and he didn't know how much longer he could keep this up. His sight was getting blurrier, and these Shinigami didn't look like they would let up anytime soon. His aura, as he called it, seemed to resonate with something. He felt a strong urge to touch a claw to the air around him, and he used the last of his strength to do just that. No good. I have to. His thoughts were interrupted when a strange thing showed up. It stood 3 feet away, very brilliant in the air. Apparently the Shinigami noticed it too. It opened slowly, serrated shapes flowing upward in a coordinated motion. It was oval-shaped, showing nothing but a dark, swirling void inside. Despite its strange features, Naruto yearned for it. He didn't know why he felt this. This strange sense of kinship for this portal. It was almost like going home after being gone on a long trip. But it was a kind of different home, a true home. Whatever the case, he simply wanted to plunge himself into it. Kichiro would have none of this. He readied himself for another slash at Naruto, but too late. Naruto had already entered the black void, which closed as soon as Kichiro slashed down upon him. Shit! How did that hollow figure out how to use Garganta so early? Not to mention he was capable of fighting 5 Shinigami to a standstill, killing one of them. Soul Society may have a heap of trouble thanks to our mistake. Kichiro kicked the ground in frustration. The other 3 Shinigami looked at him in sympathy. While they had all liked Hisao, none were as close to him as their 20th seat. But the words of their leader were coming back to haunt. Would that hollow really become a huge threat? They had no idea. The black portal deposited Naruto on a sandy desert. White sand and quartz trees littered the place, and in the perpetual night sky, a pure white crescent moon filled the land with its only light source. It was beautiful, in its own way. Naruto did indeed feel the particular feeling of coming back home, but that thought was overshadowed by those of the Shinigami. He laid down on the ground sleepily, and punched the sand with his fist. Fuck! Who do those Shinigami think they are, to get in the way of my revenge? I'll kill them! I'll kill all of them! From now on, every Shinigami I meet is a dead man, no matter who they are! He exclaimed in a flurry of rage. Naruto had no idea how much that sentiment was shared throughout the white sand of Hueco Mundo. Chapter 3: Los Sacrificios. He lay there for a while, feeling nothing but the cool sand on his body as it moved about its path. His mustard-yellow eyes were unfocused, instead simply pointed down at the ground, looking at nothing. It would seem like he was asleep, or even dead. But Naruto Uzumaki was very much awake and alive. His previous rage for the Shinigami had subsided, and now he was left with nothing but confusion. Despite his joy on coming to this place, he still had no idea where he was or what he would do with himself and his vengeance now. A sharp jolt of pain shot through his body, and he looked down at the wound inflicted from the Shinigami and frowned. It wouldn't do to have sand get in the wound. He stretched his legs and tail before pulling himself upright, looking at the crescent moon overhead. It was a strange moon, in that it seemed almost unnatural. Underneath the moon, there was an extremely tall sand dune, easily dwarfing the others in the vicinity. The top of the dune would be a perfect place to get a better perspective on this entire place. He approached the dune, and sank his sharp claws into the confines of the sand. Little bits of sand fell off, but it seemed stable enough to climb. Gently, he placed his other limbs inside before beginning his ascent. The sand dune was about 400 feet in height, and it didn't take Naruto very much time to finish scaling it, his sharp claws and ninja background being of remarkable help. As he reached the top, he thought he noticed some kind of strange peculiarity way off in the distance, but he quickly brushed it off as his wound began to flare up again. Wow, what a view, the hollow thought as he looked over the white desert. Its sheer magnitude appalled him. There was nothing but sand for as far as the eye could see. Quartz trees littered the entire landscape, and he vaguely spotted 1 or 2 more hollows off in the far distance, their appearance incredibly different from his own. He turned around to view a similar scene from behind. It was such a surreal scene that the desert seemed like it had a life of its own. The sand undulated up and down, side to side, and made choices on where to go. Unpredictable they were, but life itself was unpredictable. Naruto knew at that moment that his life would be governed by the desert. Things that happen, and people that he will meet are all an account of the desert's will. But if the desert governed his life, then the moon governed the desert's. It provided dim light to the desert, and allowed it to be in existence in the first place. Naruto felt a strange sense of curiosity come over him. He felt that there was something more to this place. Something beyond the sand. His mind was just screaming at him to go find out what it was. Without thinking, he jumped off of the sand dune, not harmed in the slightest from the fall. He landed 5 feet next to a quartz tree, before one of his feet got stuck in something. It was like the sand had started to collapse on itself, the pressure forming a concave structure. Then the sand fell entirely, leaving a sort of pit that would be used in a pitfall or antlion pit. The fox hollow's eyes widened as gravity performed its dirty work. He grasped onto a branch of the tree, but it was to no avail. The branch snapped off as if it was a twig. He fell forward, and he tried to grab onto the sand, only to have run it straight through his fingers. He felt a strange sensation, and realized that his already underground legs were pulling him into the subterranean reaches of the world. Below the surface of the sand, in the subterranean Minos forest, several dozen hollows were duking it out, every one of them attempting to bury its soul by eating fellow hollow. A distance away from the swarming mass of flesh and mask stood a dozen jillion, each one milling about in an unruly rhythm reminiscent of their kind. A small amount of sand fell onto a single hollow's head, causing it to glance upwards in confusion. This setback gave enough time for another hollow to sink its teeth into the confused hollow's shoulder. Then, a small portion of the sand ceiling completely gave way, drawing the attention of the hollows and even the jillion. The sand eventually cleared, and the beings below noticed a small, vexing object falling directly down to the bottom. It disappeared behind a large quartz tree for a moment, before landing about 100 feet away. The hollows stared at the new arrival, their previous hunger for each other conveniently forgotten. The distorted figure had risen to its feet, and the dust began to clear. Before them stood a fox-like hollow, its animalistic features very prominent and unique, but it was still clearly one of their own. One of the bolder hollows rushed towards the newcomer, clearly enticed by the exceptional power that it was giving off. Naruto, meanwhile, was still disoriented from the sudden fall. He barely had time to register the large, gaping maw that attempted to bite into him. He clumsily avoided the attack, taking time to glare as he did. He then followed up with a well-placed kick, which easily sent the hollow flying back. The sudden attack of the hollow caused the others to continue with what they were doing, eat each other. What are they doing? He thought, as he watched the others devour each other in a frenzy. While Naruto was thinking, the hollow attacking him took time to swing one of its wiry limbs at him. The obnoxious limb missed, and went crashing into the rock ground. Before the hollow could retract it, it was stepped on by one of Naruto's claws, which pinned it straight into the ground. He eyed the tentacle, an unreadable look in his black eyes. Then, he sank his teeth into the joint, before ripping it clean off. He didn't know why he was compelled to do it. He supposed it was just his hollow instincts. Nevertheless, his sharp teeth ripped off the tentacle limb with serious gusto. It's good, thought Naruto as he began to eat the detached tentacle. Green blood dribbled from his mouth, making him look all the more menacing. Naruto was an intelligent hollow, there was no doubt about that. However, that hollow was almost as satisfying as a Shinigami. Even an intelligent hollow like him wouldn't be able to resist his natural hollow instincts. He grinned fairly, and burst forth into the fray with unnatural speed, biting and tearing anything that got in his way in an attempt to satiate himself. Naruto stumbled into his cave, clutching the side wound he received from a particularly nasty hollow. He had found the cave very high up on the subterranean cliffs of the Minos forest, and it was nearly unreachable to those who didn't know the way. It had been a few weeks' time since his descent into the forest, and the hollow had been trying to balance escaping, revenge, and hunger. So far, it hadn't gone too well, as there weren't that many exits back to the surface it would seem. He had traveled out many miles but didn't come across something that even looked like it would function as an exit. The hollow turned around and looked across the horizon. He avoided that place, as that was where the Ajuchas hid. Naruto had gained some knowledge of the world with every non-mindless hollow he ate. The underground of Hueco Mundo was where the generally weak hollows lurked. Even the Ajuchas here were low level. So, if he was to find a way to destroy Konoha and fight the Shinigami, it would have to be on the surface. Naruto growled. Even if the Ajuchas were low level, they were still Ajuchas. It would be best not to cross them. He looked down. Things seemed to be going on normally. He had recently seen a group of hollows become a jillion, and frankly it both excited him and worried him. On one hand, the amount of power gained was beautifully enticing. On the other hand, the thought of becoming mindless wasn't very appealing. He quietly mused on this topic, before he saw it. A garganta had formed on the forest floor, and a small group of hollows came spewing out of it. They seemed to be running from something. Naruto looked at them with one eye, almost dismissing the entire thing. But that was before 20 or 30 Shinigami also came out of the garganta. Apparently in pursuit of the escaping hollows, Naruto turned his full attention to them as he saw one of the Shinigami get a random hollow. All of the hollows stopped, each one looking at their disappearing brethren. In a heartbeat, there were now 5 more who joined the first one, none of them able to register what happened before it was too late. Then the carnage broke loose. The hollows were now completely focused on the Shinigami, each one wanting to consume them. Naruto looked on in anger. This was such a blatant disregard for his species. Yes, hollows ate humans, Shinigami, and each other, but Naruto knew that every hollow accepted this as a part of life. The food chain, if you will. He felt his hatred for the Shinigami rise a notch. Here were these beings, who fancied themselves divine protectors to humans. They also considered it their birthright to slaughter the hollow species en masse. They didn't understand that this was the way things worked. Their protocol was just unnatural. With a roar, the fox leaped from his cave, eager to spill some Shinigami blood. He fell nearly 200 feet, which would have killed a human, but thankfully he was not one of those. After landing, he noticed that the current hollows were losing very easily. Occasionally, one of the stronger hollows would overwhelm and kill a Shinigami, but they were still being pushed back. He slipped into the battle carefully and gutted one Shinigami before devouring it. He was about to go for a second one before his claws were stopped by a Zanpakuto. The sharp objects met with a clang, and neither combatant was able to get the advantage. Naruto stepped back and began to carefully scrutinize his opponent. He was a Shinigami of average height, with spiky burgundy hair. He held a serious frown, though not one that was unfriendly or scornful. Unknown to him, the Shinigami's name was Kano Ashido. He wasn't as battle-hardened as he would be in years to come, nor did he have the same battle experience and abilities. But to say he wasn't the strongest of the group would be insulting to him. He was the most skilled with the Zanpakuto, even if he never managed to unlock Shurikai. His Kido also trumped almost everyone in the group, save for a few specialists. Ashido didn't spare a word, preferring not to converse with hollows. Naruto was going to say something, but was cut off by Ashido's sudden attack. Naruto barely had enough time to block with his tail, but Ashido kept on pressing. He had virtually no defense, but the strength and erratic fighting style more than made up for it. The hollow pulled off from Ashido's strikes and reappeared to the left side of him. He attempted to bite the Shinigami, but Ashido went for a thrust straight through the hollow's mouth. It was ineffective though, as Naruto bit down on the blade, stopping its assault. The Shinigami tried to pull it free, a grunt of frustration on his face. Naruto's jaw was just too strong for him to actually have any success. The hollow, meanwhile, began looking around himself for a short time. Another hollow had drilled through a Shinigami to the left of him, and yet Ashido kept up a calm facade. Naruto pulled the sword out of his mouth and blocked the predictable counterattack with his tail. Ashido put some distance between himself and his opponent, feeling that direct combat would be useless. The fox leered at the unagitated face of his adversary. "You Shinigami don't care much for your comrades, do you?" he mocked. Ashido glared at the fox, finally letting some exploitable emotion onto his face. "And what would you know about Shinigami camaraderie, Hollow?" he asked. "Oh, I know plenty about it, Shinigami. Your pathetic trust in your comrades and in your own abilities make most of you very arrogant. I'm very sure that most of the Shinigami here think you would clean up all the hollows here, go home." Naruto paused in his speech as he saw a hollow puncture another Shinigami. He closed one eye and smiled sadistically. "And call it a day," he finished. If the sounds and sights of fighting did not exist at the moment, you could practically feel the tension between the two reverberate throughout the area. Ashido felt his ire rising. How dare this scum casually accuse any one of his friends of that when he didn't even know the situation? Naruto let no expression come onto his masked face. Whether he realized Ashido's cold anger or not, he continued on as if nothing was happening. "And it's not just trust and arrogance. Everyone in your species carries a sort of condemnation for anyone who is different than you. You claim to be the protectors of humans, but you hold them in the same disregard you hold for us." A crease appeared on Ashido's forehead. "And that is why you actively pursue hollows. Your arrogance in your abilities and your condemnation of our species is what fuels stunts like this." Ashido began to growl. "You have no hope of defeating us, Shinigami. Let me make this very clear. Every single one of you will be slaughtered here. We will dance on your graves. It's what idiots like you deserve for complete stupidity." "That did it," Ashido snapped. He charged at the hollow, what little defense he had abandoned. The hollow just stood there, relishing in the misery that he had caused to the wretched Shinigami. Naruto slowly relaxed himself into a stance, ready to take the Shinigami head-on. He was a little surprised when the berserk Ashido nearly managed to break through his guard. Ashido's attacks had strength, but they also had experience far more than any other Shinigami he had faced. He managed to block over a dozen sword strikes with his tail, taking small scratches on it as he did. But one attack slipped through his guard, and caught the hollow on the hip. Naruto hissed out in pain, but was already on his feet. He went towards the left side of Ashido, hoping to use that as a feint. Ashido switched his position to avoid Naruto, but that was exactly what the hollow was hoping for. Naruto's strong paw managed to catch Ashido's right arm and the Zanpakuto that was holding it. He thrust the limb out to the side, jolting the rest of the Shinigami. But Ashido was ready for this. He took his free hand and extending his middle and index finger, aiming them directly at the hollow. It was a slow motion on his part, almost lazy, but it could instill fear in the hearts of many opponents. Sure. Had a number for Byakurai too. Naruto avoided the brunt of the lightning bolt by releasing Ashido, but his right shoulder was singed from the attack. He kneeled down momentarily, instinctively clutching the wound. It turned out to be a bad mistake on his part. The Shinigami had recovered the use of his right arm, and was now going in for the finishing blow. But it was of no use as Naruto's tail shot out and caught him on the left side. Ashido hit the ground with a hard thud, though he was fortunately spared of any broken bones. He shakily got to his feet. The hollow was now sporting a wide grin on his face, like nothing had happened at all. He glared at the trickster. He could see it now. He had purposely left himself open so he could go for that tail strike. He had to admit, it was his first time that he had fought a hollow that used such underhanded tactics. Usually hollows would just attack, eat, repeat. But this one had crossed all boundaries he had had for expectations. He looked around him. There were not that many Shinigami dead, though even he knew that staying here long enough would cause all of them to die. Even if their mission was to eliminate the hollow menace, finding suitable shelter should be their top priority. Ashido's hollow opponent sneered. This fight was dragging out for too long. He had a plan to upkeep, and couldn't hold it if this continued to progress. He looked over to his right, seeing a particularly large hollow fighting a short Shinigami. Naruto grinned to himself as he saw an opportunity arise. He rushed over to the fighting pair, which left Ashido temporarily stunned. Speaking of the fighting pair, both of them now noticed the fox hollow coming at them. The short Shinigami braced himself for impact, inadvertently leaving himself open to attack from the other hollow. The Shinigami was surprised as the fox hollow went not for him, but for the hollow that he was currently fighting. The fox completely passed him up, knocking the other hollow away with a single strike. The short Shinigami looked up to see the face of his best friend, Ashido, who now had a look of realization on his face at the new individual. Their reunion was cut short as a strong claw gripped the back of his robes, lofting him upwards. The hollow wrapped his front paw around the Shinigami's neck, claws poised to strike at any moment. A bead of sweat ran down the Shinigami's face as he grew nervous. He was already injured, so there was no way he could have fought off the hollow even before it had grabbed him. He looked over and saw Ashido gripping his Zanpakuto until his knuckles turned white. He was clearly contemplating the situation at hand. Then he felt the hollow's disgusting hot breath wash over his entire soul. It sent shivers down his spine, and that was not something that could be easily done. When Naruto spoke, it was addressed not to the captured Shinigami, but to Ashido. "Drop your Zanpakuto, or this one dies," he stated simply, digging his claws into the victim's neck for emphasis. Both Shinigami's eyes widened. A hostage situation? They were obviously thinking that something as savage and primitive as a hollow would ever think up something like that. "Hey Ashido, forget about me. Just kill this hollow," the captured Shinigami said weakly. The claws were clearly getting to him. "What are you saying? You know I can't do that," shouted the redhead. His expression was contradictory to his resolve, as he openly looked indecisive. "You have 30 seconds, said Naruto, butting in on their little conversation. Ashido began. 15 seconds. Ashido raised his Zanpakuto. 10 seconds. He lifted it up. 5 seconds. And he prepared to. 3, 2, on. Clang. Ashido's Zanpakuto fell to the ground with a deafening clang. His best friend was now unconscious, but the wide grin on Naruto's face just got wider. Kick it away, he demanded. Ashido did just what he was told. The deadly blade now lay useless 20 feet away from the fighters, and Naruto dropped Ashido's friend roughly. Before anyone could react, Naruto was on Ashido himself. The Shinigami attempted to block, but without his Zanpakuto it wouldn't do any good. Naruto and Ashido slid across the ground, digging a trench and lifting up much rock. The Hollow's head was delivering a nasty blow to Ashido. He completely slammed Ashido into a tree, which made him spew blood in the process. Ashido at this point was barely conscious, and it wouldn't take much more. The Hollow released his head, allowing Ashido to fall a little. But this was not in Ashido's favor, as he was nailed at point blank from Naruto's tail. That blow did the trick. The Shinigami was knocked out, and Naruto caught the unconsciousness Shinigami by draping him across his back. With Ashido on his back, the Hollow began to walk back towards the other Shinigami. He sneered in disgust as he looked at the scrawny Shinigami. He would not be a good meal, even if Ashido would make up for it. He duly noted the Zanpakuto at the hip, before nudging it away. These Shinigami truly were weak if anything should happen to their Zanpakuto. None too gently, he hoisted the Shinigami onto his back, claws sinking into the flesh. He looked around and saw that the other Shinigami had retreated away, probably due to the Hollow's superior numbers. And speaking of the Hollows, one of them nearly just took a huge chunk out of both Naruto and Ashido. The intelligent Hollow jumped back, cursing that his instincts had dulled. His eyes widened as every single Hollow there began to lock on him. Naruto looked at the Shinigami. They were likely the reason that he was being targeted so much. He cursed his own stupidity. Why the hell didn't he pay better attention to his surroundings? He was a ninja in life, for God's sake. He avoided another strike from an insect Hollow. He couldn't fight them now, so he would have to simply avoid them. He ran through the line of Hollows, taking quite a few blows, but not allowing any fatal ones to go towards the two Shinigami. He took them all head-on, plowing through the defense of the weak Hollows, sending several flying into the air. He didn't spare them a second glance as he clumsily leapt onto one of the branches of the trees. The remaining Hollows stood there stupidly as they watched the small Hollow rocket its way through the Minos forest on the treetops, carrying two unconscious Shinigami with it. From the high quartz trees of the Minos forest, you can see everything for miles. The locations of Minos Grande, other Hollow, and Hollow hideouts could be seen. Unfortunately, you had to be a very agile Hollow or have some sort of climbing ability to even think about getting up there. The trees were steep, and the smooth quartz could be slippery at times. However, Naruto was a very agile Hollow. With his size and body structure, he could easily climb the trees of the Minos forest. The problem was trying to do that with two unconscious Shinigami on his back. He had nearly fallen a half-dozen times, which prompted him to think if he should just abandon the Shinigami. He shook such thoughts out of his head as he prepared to land on a particularly large branch. He let the two Shinigami fall from his back onto the branch. He looked them over, before adopting his usual look of hatred. You know, if I didn't need you two, I would have slaughtered the both of you back there. He paused for a moment to glare at Ashido, despite knowing that he couldn't hear him. And if I was actually trying to kill you, instead of just trying to knock you out, you wouldn't have lasted a minute in that fight, Shinigami. Even if you are the strongest Shinigami I've fought, I'm not exactly the same Hollow I was a month ago. He allowed himself to smile arrogantly at the thought, before resuming his task. Unfortunately, I need you two for a very particular task. I'm sure they will be very pleased to see you. He turned away from the two Shinigami to look away at a very dark expanse of the Minos forest. He glanced back at the Shinigami before smiling very sadistically. The dark expanse is somewhat of a forbidden area throughout this sector of the Minos forest. It wasn't through any sort of law or code. Just an unspoken rule. Even the mindless hollows instinctively knew to stay away from that place. The dark hole was like a permanent authority to the denizens of the Minos forest, and almost every hollow knew what lurked in there. Going in there was the equivalent of suicide. Despite this, Naruto looked on defiantly, as if he were ready to challenge this dark mass. Even now he was getting dangerously close to the place. No normal hollow would dare venture out this far. It wasn't easy to get here either. Even though hollows never went in, it didn't stop them from completely crowding around the surface, which made ground entry impossible. Which is exactly why he had taken to the trees. As luck would have it, the particular branch he was on jutted out severely, forming somewhat of a natural entrance. He situated the two Shinigami on his back again, and squatted down in preparation for a jump. Off the forest floor, a select few hollows witnessed the fox hollow leap fearlessly into the abyss. They made a few mindless grunts, almost in fear and admiration. They then saw him drop to the forest floor, making almost a kind of beckoning gesture with his tail. One of the hollows approached the darkness slowly, as if it were afraid that it would consume him. He reached out a foot and stepped inside. The fox hollow smiled ruefully at the success. On their friend's action, the other few hollows stepped into the darkness, and were soon progressing deeper. Pretty soon, they were all following the rapidly disappearing figure into the darkness. It was a quiet atmosphere in the darkness. The only sounds that could be heard were the distant cries of hollows and the noises of little hollow animals. But even those noises were drowned out by the moving near-silent form of Naruto. It was truly unnerving. After being surrounded by nothing but hollows, seeing an absence of them could be quite startling. The way twisted and turned, and even the unshakable quartz trees looked warped here. They created obstacles, and Naruto once again jumped into the trees for a better route. It wasn't long before he reached the center of the expanse. Below, on the forest floor, stood an almost beehive-like structure, a monolith in the center that gave an ominous feel. Even the trees, with their unyielding size, seemed to avoid it. Naruto wasn't deterred. He leapt from the tree, falling to the cold, hard ground. He walked up to the side of the structure and placed a paw on it. It was cold and made of rock. There were numerous holes on it that he could probably squeeze through. He gripped the outside of one of the holes and swung himself through. It looked like he was small enough to fit through. He crouched at the edge of the tunnel, and that was where he saw them. Around 10 Ajuchas, very low-level ones, but not the type to piss off in this area of Hueco Mundo. They were sitting in a circle, huddled around a light that giving off from a bioluminescent Ajuchas. They had not noticed his presence yet, his Ryatsu weak enough to be overlooked and the light dim enough to hide his position. They were apparently talking, though he couldn't make out any words. He placed his paw on the rock face, before a very small section broke off and gave. Naruto cursed and hid himself from view, before he gradually lifted up his head to view. Thankfully, they were still talking animately. But then suddenly, a large green Ajuchas appearing in the rock next to him. It aimed a powerful fist at him that he just barely avoided. He tumbled from the hole, whirling into the center. The other Ajuchas bristled, but otherwise gave no indication that they never knew he was there. He looked at his back, and saw the Shinigami barely remaining in place. The other Ajuchas were rising to their feet, clearly excited by their visitor. Naruto watched on as a large, humanoid Ajuchas with a perpetual smiling face took up the front. "Well everyone, it looks like we've got ourselves a visitor," the Ajuchas cackled with mirth, the others around him copying. Naruto was started to regret his plan. Trying to fight off a score of Ajuchas who probably wouldn't even give him the time of day wasn't the best idea. That particular sentiment was confirmed as the green Ajuchas from before came soaring in, throwing a punch that would undoubtedly knock him out and allow the hollows around to feast on his innards. Reflexively, his long tail wrapped around the weaker Shinigami, pulling him straight into the line of the Ajucha's fist. The Ajuchas tensed for a moment, then retracted its fist just before it punched straight through the meat shield. Naruto grinned. There was no way that the Ajuchas would obliterate their most coveted meal. "Great Ajuchas, I bring you all a gift," said the normal hollow, his sarcastic patronizing tone seen through by everyone there. "Interesting," said the leader as he held back the green Ajuchas. Naruto would bet a pretty penny that his masked smile got a lot bigger. But coming to us deliberately is the smartest thing to do, Little Hollow. What stopped us from simply killing you and taking the Shinigami? The leader asked. The leader watched on in silent amusement as the Hollow placed the Shinigami on the ground, before situating his fangs right above the torso of the Shinigami, ready to tear into the flesh. The other Ajuchas looked almost offended by this action, but he wasn't perturbed at all. This Hollow was different. He was intelligent, but that was only part of the equation. His own swarthy eyes stared into Naruto's scathing ones and could pick out shrewdness, ruthlessness, and even triumph. I think you can figure out what this means. Naruto didn't let his guard down even when he was talking. Now, what I want is simply information. If you can give me that, then I'll give you these 2 Shinigami. And I know how much you want to eat them. The Ajuchas looked mutinous for a moment, but they weren't willing to give up a chance to eat Shinigami. Fine then. What did you want to know? Asked the leader, his voice holding a tone of resignation. First of all, how do I escape the Minos forest and get back to the surface? The Ajuchas around them sniggered, though both Naruto and the leader ignored them. The nearest exit is a narrow tunnel around 1 mile north of here. The thing is, it is located on a high cliff, so unless you can climb the trees, you won't be getting to it. Naruto nodded, taking time to process the information before asking his next question. Is there some kind of great power in Hueco Mundo? Maybe an army or a kingdom or something like that. The leader Ajuchas was about to speak, but Naruto cut him off. Who also hates the Shinigami? The Ajuchas in the room burst out laughing, leaving Naruto embarrassed but also boiling in rage. What's the matter, kid? You got a little vendetta against the Shinigami, or what? Jeered one of the other Ajuchas. The tone of sardonic glee was evident in the voice. Yeah, I do. What's it to you, huh? Asked Naruto. They all laughed again, insulting Naruto's strength, intelligence, and sanity. Okay, settle down, said the leader with a small chuckle. He was clearly amused too by Naruto's proclamation. For the record, Little Hollow, there is something like what you're talking. Hollows from all over go to this place, to become part of this great army. Those that do receive excellent meals, living standards, and glory. But you have to be powerful, otherwise they won't accept you at all. Even we only have an extended connection to the place, even though we've tried to make it official many, many times. As far as I know of, its existence is unthreatened in Hueco Mundo. It stands as a great palace that can be seen from hundreds of miles away. And it rules over most of the territory I've explored. What's its name? Asked Naruto. The Ajuchas grinned. Las Noches. Chapter 4 La Luciérnaga. His ears twitched when those words came from the Ajucha's mouth. Las Noches. The name was strangely poetic in a way. Las Noches. The way it rolled off the tongue in the smoothest manner was both beautiful and intimidating. Whoever came up with it had great naming sense. When he heard the Ajuchas finish talking, Naruto never took his eyes off the leading Ajuchas, or his mouth off the flesh of the Shinigami. To do so would be suicide, because he knew they would pounce the second he did. The leading Ajuchas stood there reluctantly, a forced smile on his face. The Fox Hollow was glaring at him, and the expression on his face conveyed that he could get defensive. The dim light of the hive didn't give away the leader's full expression, but it was probably one of barely contained anxiousness. A fine meal was right in front of him, and if he didn't play his cards right, it could be taken away from him. The Hollow did not want to answer any more questions, and simply wanted to get on with the meal. Where can I find this Las Noches? Asked Naruto, his voice morphing to a practical, calculating tone which was in contrast to his normal, psychotic one. There was a faint tone of nervousness present, judging from the way his voice cracked slightly. The Ajuchas paused for a moment, as if he were debating to answer the question, or simply attack instead. The Fox Hollow was no match for him, but he could very well finish off the Shinigami before he died. The other Ajuchas were now chanting dumbly, which was grating on the mind. He would have to decide quickly, lest he wait and carelessly make the wrong decision. With a strained voice, he finally said, Once you get back to the surface, walk around 10 miles to the east of here. At that point, the Grand Palace of Las Noches should come into view. You'll know it when you see it. It has a domed roof and 4 tall pillars flanking it. Naruto nodded slowly, not really caring if they were lying or not. If he was, then he would simply find someone else to fulfill his needs. His confidence in getting away safely didn't waver in the slightest. The Minos were still eyeing the 2 Shinigami that he was keeping hostage. He had no more questions, those could be saved for when he arrived at Las Noches. But that didn't mean he could casually release the prey in front of 10 hungry Ajuches, without getting caught in the crossfire. So he defiantly kept his perpetual glare on the leading Ajuches. He couldn't just abruptly walk away from the Shinigami, as doing so would likely startle them. He would have to do it slowly and subtly, all the while making sure that he kept his distance. In a slow yet smooth motion, Naruto panned his eyes to the left, leaving the gaze of the leader Ajuches while still keeping a close eye on the Hollow's actions. He watched all of the Ajuches carefully, and after what seemed like an eternity, he stepped away from the fallen Shinigami and closed his mouth. The effect was instantaneous. Once Naruto's jagged teeth were out of the equation, the Hollows flew into action. All rationale was forgotten as the Ajuches clambered over their comrades. The leader got the first bite. Once Naruto had backed away, the large Ajuches spasmed forward at the Shinigami in a split second. He didn't hesitate, and tore through the skin and sinew of the smaller Shinigami. The other Ajuches had arrived, eager to get their own shot at the food. Every one of them fought its way to the front of the line, ripping off pieces of flesh if need be. One of the larger Ajuches tore into the chest cavity of Ishido, while the leader dined on the abundant muscle of the smaller Shinigami. Both of the unconscious Shinigami never woke up, as they were killed instantly by the gruesome deeds of the Hollows. Blood spurted from the carcasses, drenching their hollow masks with the fluid. Limbs were ripped cruelly from bodies, leaving with a disturbing tearing noise. The muscle gave way to reveal the internal organs, which were also devoured without hesitation. Even the bones were eaten away by the Ajuches, being just as nourishing to Hollows as the rest of the body. The leader, being the most capable of controlling his hunger, kept out a watchful eye during the entire meal. The Fox Hollow was attempting to sneak away during the feast, and if anything, he was doing fairly successful, having eluded the attention of nearly every Ajuches. Except him, of course. Naruto stumbled through one of the holes in the rock, hoping to get away before the Ajuches turned their attention on him. He had seen the way they ate, and that had personally surprised him. Not the viciousness mind, but the way they seemed to lose all semblance of control once food was in the area. The tunnel he was crawling through wasn't very long, only about 20 feet in length. Hopefully, he could quickly leave the Ajuches' nest and escape into the darkness before they finished their meal. And if that didn't work, well, he just hoped that the backup plan would. Desperately, he pulled himself along, uncaring that the rough surface of the rock was making his skin raw. The old life over limb saying would have been perfect for the situation. As he neared the exit, he felt the sense of relief course through his body. The outside world was becoming more vivid. At least as vivid as it could in this darkness. He was just about to reach the exit when he felt a strong blow hit his backside, rocketing him forward out of the hole. He skidded along the ground, friction causing even more wounds for the poor Hollow. He had landed a good distance away from the Ajuches' hive, but was still a ways away from the total darkness of the abyss. The injured Hollow struggled to his feet, coughing a few times as he did. Blood trickled down from his forehead and flowed into his angry eyes, and Naruto was barely able to see what was in front of him. The dust had gathered into the air, initially creating little more than a distorted, hazy figure around 25 feet away. Then the dust began to clear, and Naruto felt that both of his offerings had been a waste of time. Standing across from Naruto was the leader Ajuches, his masked smile stretched out even more than usual. There were a few splotches of what appeared to be blood splattered all over his mask, no doubt from his recent meal. The other Ajuches were nowhere to be found, but that did not lessen the visible threat in the slightest. Naruto shook some debris off of him, before the large Ajuches opened his terrible mouth and laughed. A hideous mixture of saliva and blood flew from the mouth, which made the scene even more disgusting. The laugh was loud and raucous, and also had an arrogant tone that reverberated throughout the area. The Ajuches stopped laughing and turned his head towards Naruto, still smiling a toothy grin. Naruto relaxed into his fighting stance, but the Ajuchas didn't go on guard at all. "You're quite the sneaky little hollow, aren't you? So eager to save your own skin that you do it in such a roundabout way. Those cowardly yet intelligent actions are perfect for your appearance," the Ajuchas started, eyeing Naruto's fox-like features. "You're going to need more than a couple of Shinigami to get away from us, though," said the hollow conversationally, though his words sent Naruto on edge. A bead of sweat ran underneath his mask, and Naruto felt a sense of shameful fear enter his being. Unacceptable for a creature made from fear. "Unfortunately for you, I have the most self-control of anyone in our little group. Though you managed to distract the other Ajuchas long enough to get away, something as minor as that would not work on me. You are an idiot to even think about coming to us and getting out alive," the Ajuchas continued, his words imprinting upon Naruto's consciousness. "Bringing 2 Shinigami to our hive in order to appease us will not spare you. I only answered your questions because I didn't want to risk the precious food. However, just because I ate does not mean I'm willing to let more food just walk away unharmed," he explained. The Ajuchas then stopped talking, and sauntered his way over to where Naruto was standing. Naruto attempted to move, but the Ajuchas Ryatsu was making it difficult. No matter how strong he was as a normal hollow, he wasn't ready to take on a full-fledged Ajuchas. If he wasn't mistaken, this battle would go just like fights with Orochimaru when he was just a green genin. His eyes darted around the area, searching for any sort of possible escape route. The Ajuchas would be able to cover all of the ground area, and it would be impossible to escape with his inferior speed. Taking to the trees seemed like the best option, though if it turned out the Ajuchas could climb them, then he was fucked. He was too careless, as the Ajuchas seemed like it was ready for another meal. The puny hollow didn't notice him slink ever closer, like a lion ready to attack, yet not so obvious that it would put the prey on edge. But he didn't strike immediately. He liked to play with his food first. It was too late when Naruto noticed the Ajuchas was closer. He was already in range. His keen senses sent him on even more alert, and the raw essence of primal fear wormed its way through his body. His animal instincts were telling him to run, but his body didn't obey. It was an odd sight, Naruto still in a fighting stance but so afraid of the adversary in front of him. He was confident in his offering beforehand, but without it he realized how foolish and arrogant his plan had been. The Ajuchas touched his mask lightly with his hand, forcing the younger hollow to look at him. "This is a dog-eat-dog world, little hollow. You're not a human anymore. You're a hollow, and you are in Hueco Mundo. There are no laws, no punishments, and no order. We are animals. Animals that must eat everything weaker than them in order to survive. There is no negotiation when it comes to food," the Ajuchas explained. The Ajuchas let go of his face, before lining up his fist to begin pummeling Naruto. He registered the pure attack speed the Ajuchas had, as it had easily breached through his defenses. He felt agonizing pain in his side, and as he looked down he noticed a good-sized chunk of flesh missing. The Ajuchas had bitten it clean off. The pain jolted Naruto out of his fear, and he admonished himself for the mistake. God, he was pathetic. He had been in dozens of fights with stronger opponents, and had never been afraid of them. If he was a hollow, he should act like one. He pushed off the ground, using a little Ryatsu to increase the elasticity of the ground. When he had put himself out of attacking range, he clutched his side, getting blood all over his hands. He kneeled down, hoping to get some reprieve, but the other hollow would have none of that. He threw a heavy punch that caught Naruto's mask. Amazingly, the white material wasn't even dented from the assault, but the same couldn't be said for its wearer. The fox hollow flew back what must have been 50 feet, his tail waving wildly in the air as he flew. The Ajuchas used a primitive form of Sonito to appear at the hollow before he hit the ground. He grabbed Naruto, and clutched the smaller hollow, squeezing him and bringing him closer. This forced Naruto to be face to face with the Ajucha's mask, which was grinning deviously at him. No way, he's at such a high level, thought Naruto weakly as he was suffocated by the hollow's hot, putrid breath. The Ajucha's spiked forearms were digging into his skin and was making the experience all the worse. When you're this weak, there's no way that Lost No Chase would let you into their army. I'd give up on that dream of destroying the Shinigami, and simply resign yourself to becoming my food. Though their little skirmish was over, the Ajuchas continued to enjoy taunting Naruto. It had barely lasted 30 seconds. Give up, give up, give up. Those were the words that ran through Naruto's mind, and the only words that he actually registered from the Ajuchas. He had heard those words many times throughout his life, and had heard them far more than he would have liked to. The two despicable words that he loathed being told. Give up. His lip curled, and cruel teeth poked into view underneath his mask. He defiantly glared at the Ajuchas pinning him down, just as tenacious as he has always been. His eyes slanted in a glare, and his face was gaunt. There also seemed to be a rise in temperature, as if Naruto's fiery rage was almost palpable. This bastard was crushing his ambition underneath its red fist, ripping it apart, and then burying it underneath the sand of Hueco Mundo. All because he believed the fox too weak to be able to accomplish it. Naruto wasn't prepared to let that go freely. Don't ever tell me to give up, he shrieked, beginning to pry himself free from the Ajucha's grasp, as if he were overcome with a burst of strength. He shifted a little more, and pushed on the Ajucha's arms. The Ajucha seemed to gawk in amusement as he watched Naruto resist, but when he felt Naruto begin to push harder and harder, his smirk turned into a frown. He was stunned that this puny little hollow was overwhelming him. In response, he tightened his grip on Naruto. Said hollow gave a weird cross between a moan and a roar, and put even more force on the leader's arms. Veins were bulging on both adversaries as they struggled for dominance. Neither one would give up, though the Ajuchas felt that it would be hopeless very soon. Such thoughts were not present in Naruto's mind, and the hollow's rage and strength only increased as time passed. What? Yelled the Ajuchas as his arms finally yielded to the younger hollow. Naruto hovered in the air for just a split second, though it felt like an eternity for the two of them. He took advantage of the situation, and brutally brought down his sharp claws right on the Ajucha's mask. The red Ajuchas howled in pain, 3 claw marks present on the right side of his mask from where he was struck. A large chunk of mask was missing from the right side of his mouth, letting Naruto get a slight glimpse of his bare face. Naruto collapsed onto the ground, finally feeling the grievous injury in his side. He was breathing heavily, and his adrenaline-filled rage was now all but forgotten. The wound was getting to him, and he didn't know how long he could keep this up. The Ajuchas clutched his wounded face, all the while flailing his fists around randomly. He peered through his finger and noticed a white chunk of material on the ground in front of him. Intrigued, he bent over and picked it up, studying it closely while rolling the piece of bone mask around in his hand. And then he paled. Naruto had just rolled over on his side when he heard a loud, drawn-out yell emanate from across the clearing. He jolted upright, and winced when his side wound began to protest. There was the Ajuchas, looking at his hands in horrified disbelief, standing some distance away from him. The white piece of mask fell to the ground, and Naruto felt the tension rise ever higher when it emitted a clattering noise. The Ajuchas turned to look at him afterwards, and Naruto felt himself freeze. Upon the Ajucha's face was the coldest, most evil look of pure rage and hatred that he had ever seen in his life. No human could ever reproduce that look. He stared in shock at the missing chunk from the Ajucha's mask. Once he cleared his petrification, he tilted his head to the side in confusion, not understanding what the Ajuchas was getting so worked up over. The Ajuchas was at him in an instant, his speed increasing dramatically. He mercilessly kicked Naruto away, sending him skidding along the ground. The friction from the force of the blow caused the sharp, jagged rocks to cut through Naruto's thick skin, making it raw and bleeding. The Ajuchas gave Naruto no time to recover, and was once again at Naruto's side. He placed a heavy punch straight into Naruto's gut. The smaller hollow coughed up a waterfall of blood, flying to the side again, before the Ajuchas flashed behind him and picked him up by the fur. The Ajuchas leaned his face even closer, eyes boring into Naruto. Naruto tried some feeble attempts to get away, but unsurprisingly, the bigger hollow refused to budge. Naruto's tormentor walked over to the nearest quartz tree, Naruto in tow. He held the fox hollow at arm's length for a moment, before brutally slamming his opponent straight into the quartz. It was in a manner reminiscent of Ishido's torment, but this time the Ajuchas ground Naruto against the rock, causing even more serious injuries to the wounded hollow. One of Naruto's more serious wounds caught on a jutted-out piece of quartz. Amazingly enough, Naruto hung suspended on it, his layer of open flesh and sinew painfully keeping him up. The battered hollow attempted to look away, but his face was grasped by the Ajuchas, forcing Naruto to look at him. His eyes were almost swollen shut, but he could still see that the Ajucha's cold fury had not dissipated in the slightest. "Look at me," he said simply, as he forced Naruto's eyes onto his partially broken mask. The pure venom behind the voice was staggering. Would he be capable of that much hate as an Ajuchas? "Do you see what you have done? Your little rampage broke my mask. You should very well know what happens when an Ajuchas has his mask broken." The Ajucha's cold rage was morphing, becoming a purely angry rage similar to Naruto's. He thrust Naruto against the tree again, still not satisfied. "I can never evolve into a Vasto Lord. You have permanently stunted my evolution by keeping me as an Ajuchas forever," the now permanent Ajuchas exclaimed. He dropped Naruto, allowing the hollow to crumple pitifully at his feet. He gave one final well-placed kick to Naruto, before turning away from him. "I'm going to kill you now, you understand? This game has gone on far enough, and your very existence is insulting to me," stated the Ajuchas, more to himself than to Naruto. The Ajuchas turned back around when he heard a grunt from Naruto. Naruto's skin was no longer capable of holding him aloft. The small bit of flesh ripped itself from Naruto's body, in order to continue hanging on the quartz. Naruto fell to the ground, lying at the Ajucha's feet. He desperately attempted to get up, but his body was not responding to his tries. The Ajuchas noticed that Naruto was completely at his mercy, and despite his condition, tried to smile. It came out as more of a sneer instead. "Die," he hissed loudly, as he bent down in order to begin eating the hollow. Just as the angry hollow was about to end it, a strange rumble shook the area, causing the Ajuchas to look around in confusion. Little pebbles were convulsing back and forth, making the scene look almost like a natural sequence. Naruto managed to smile despite his injuries. It worked, he thought in amazement as the rumbling became more pronounced. And then, almost ominously, it stopped. Only the shrill cry of a distant hollow rang through the landscape, and Naruto and the Ajuchas stood mystified at what happened. From the darkness spewed hundreds of normal hollows, coming forth into the clearing like a swarm of brutal insects. Howls, roars, and other animalistic cries shook the trees, and agile hollows leaped from the tops of trees in mass number, eager to join the rest of the hollows. The present horde moved closer to the hive, more hollows becoming visible as space was made free. The Ajucha's leader looked around in terror as he saw hollows in all directions getting closer, rapidly blotting out any visible ground or escape routes. He was so immersed in the situation at hand that he didn't notice Naruto limp away. The hollows were unyielding in their destructive trek, and the Ajuchas found out that he was running out of luck, and fast. He gutted the first hollow, before barely dodging a strike from another one. Using his superior speed, he rushed through a line of hollows, killing dozens while taking dozens of injuries. Fortunately for him, his thick skin held out for him, and he was left with fairly minor wounds. But he was getting overwhelmed. Two hollows crouched below and bit into his legs, causing the Ajuchas to buckle and kneel to the oppressive force. Nearby hollows started frothing at the mouth at the prospect of such a large meal, and a huge mass of hollows converged from the horde, becoming a crowded circle of hungry hollows and one unfortunate Ajuchas. There came a tortured scream from the center of the mass of flesh, and red limbs and organs flew everywhere. An explosion of blood erupted from the center, spraying everything a good 5 feet away from it. The hollows folded back in line, almost like a swarm of ants. The non-eating hollows paid them no mind, and simply continued on. The hollows at the front lines worked their ways into the holes of the hive, one after the other. After many, many hollows brazenly entered the hive, screams could be heard coming from inside. Sounds of ripping flesh dissipated as the other Ajuchas emerged from the hive, looking worse for wear but otherwise able of beating their opponents. But there was nowhere for them to go, except for the sea of hollows before them. The normal hollows were at their heels, putting all of them in a pinch. A few excess hollows coming from the rear began nipping at their heels, which caused all the Ajuchas to inadvertently fall one by one to their deaths. The hollows below wasted no time in getting to their food, each one eager to get their own shot. Even their hollow allies coming from the hive were not spared, and were ripped apart and eaten as well. When the last Ajuchas fell to his death, all was silent. However, nearly 1 minute later, a rustling noise occurred as another figure wormed his way out of the hive. From the cavern came the last surviving Ajuchas. It was a small Ajuchas, around the same size as Naruto and with brown skin. He vaguely resembled an upright insect, with the corresponding antennae, thorax, and abdomen. But the body was too warped for it to be actually considered one. It had a single tail underneath, made of large, round segments. On the end of the tail there was a rather nasty-looking stinger, made of a jade-green crystalline substance. His mask was also insected, with the deep, sunken eyes and lack of other facial features. The stinger gave off a green glow, but it wasn't the only luminescent thing. The hollow's antenna also glowed, and so did the large area of crystalline substance that it had all around its torso. There were splotches of blood all over his body, but he was completely unharmed. It was almost unnatural to view. One by one, the surrounding hollows edged closer to the Ajuchas. There was a faraway look in their eyes, almost like the luminescence was luring them. After he had escaped, Naruto took to the treetops again, which was naturally the route that had barely any hollows in it. Sure, he came across 1 or 2 hostile ones, but they were nothing he couldn't handle, even seriously injured. As he forced himself onto an outlying branch, he began to ponder his approach. He had been lucky, he realized that now. He had hoped to lure some hollows into the darkness as a fail-safe, but what had produced that big of a horde? He didn't dwell on it though. What's done is done, and if he stayed around for too long they would likely catch up to him. After around 2 hours of climbing, he once again reached his cave. This time, he had gotten there with much more than minimal trouble. He squeezed into the crevice of the cave, contorting his body in order to fit. It wasn't a very long tunnel, and within seconds he reached a much larger area. It was about 30 feet in diameter, enough of a suitable living space for the young hollow. There were various rock shelves along the walls, almost making it seem like a kind of barracks. A few rare scattered plants were situated along them. Naruto lied himself down on one of the shelves, glad to be back in his cave and away from danger. The area was unknown and treacherous to reach, and it was only by pure luck that he had found this little gem. Because of the isolation, he could take time to heal his wounds before starting to search for Las Noches. Hollows didn't have to sleep at all. They could, but they didn't need to in order to survive. It was advantageous for them to say the least, as they didn't have to worry about getting killed in their sleep. Naruto adopted a quiet, pensive mood that was rare for him as he lied awake on the rock shelf. He thought about the exit to the surface, which the Ajuchas had told him about. The Ajuchas, he thought about them as well. They were so powerful. If he became one of them, surely he would be able to match the Shinigami. He was almost giddy at the thought. But luck was not on his side, as he didn't even know how hollows could become Ajuchas. Over a month of eating hollows in this place had yielded no knowledge from any of the hollows. He did, however, know how to become a Jillian, but that alternative wasn't exactly alluring. The cave was lonely, but unlike his human self, he didn't mind the solitude. He had gotten used to it in his month as a plus, and although he wished for companions, he knew it was nothing but wishful thinking in this world. What really mattered now was food, revenge, and more food. He decided to continue on with his plan to go to Las Noches. It was reckless, but since when was he one to care about risk? They probably had a mountain of Ajuchas there, and maybe then he could learn how to become one. But what if they were unwilling to help him? He wasn't fool enough to believe the leader would just launch an assault on Soul Society just for his sake. But he should at least be able to enlist in their ranks and gain some power, right? Naruto roared. All these uncertainties were giving him a headache. What the hell happened to his deal with it when it comes attitude that had gotten him so far? He was Naruto Uzumaki, damn it! He didn't just sit around and think about uncertainties. He dove into action. Naruto rose to his suddenly, determined to reach Las Noches. But a spasm of pain shot through him as his wound reacted, and he grudgingly lied back down. He would go in a few days, once his damned wounds healed. This must be it, thought Naruto, as it looked at the tunnel. True to the Ajucha's words, it was indeed located on a high cliff. He had taken the auxiliary route here this time, wanting to avoid the abyss. He was now standing on a big ledge that was outside of the exit. He walked into it, taking note of the surrounding darkness. Around 5 feet into the tunnel, the path becomes slanted, and he would have to climb his way up. He was about to step on a foothold when a voice halted him. Wait! Naruto turned around at an amazing speed, trying to locate the owner of that voice. His eyes widened when he noticed a familiar hollow standing behind him, about 20 to 30 regular hollow right behind him. Naruto racked his brain, and his mind settled in on his memory of the Ajucha's hive. The fox's eyes widened. He trailed off as he remembered the bioluminescent Ajuchas that the others were all huddled around. He snarled and put himself on guard, in every way prepared for a fight. But the bioluminescent Ajuchas calmly raised a pincer, which seriously confused Naruto. I am not here to fight you, young hollow. Rather, we are here to talk to you, explained the hollow. His voice was quiet and wispy, and seemed to release a calming aura. It reminded Naruto of Shino for a moment, until he noticed the underlying sorrow and emotion that was hidden. Whatever the case, this being did not have the personality of the average hollow. Naruto didn't drop his guard, though. You learn to do that very quickly when living in Hueco Mundo. For all he knew, this hollow might just be leading him into a false sense of security. Why should I trust you? Asked Naruto. Nothing changed on the face of the other hollow, almost as if he were expecting this type of reaction. In case you haven't forgotten, you're one of the Ajuchas who was in that group. Yes, said the Ajuchas patiently. But that doesn't mean that I was a part of that group willingly, it finished, finally letting some readable emotion onto its mask. What do you mean? Asked Naruto, curious but at the same time suspicious. Rather than tell you, I'll show you what I mean, he said. At the same time he did, the crystalline substance on his body grew brighter, and the 20 or so hollows behind moved closer, staring at the crystals in even more of a daze. Even Naruto himself felt somewhat compelled to stare. My body acts as a lure for mindless and near-mindless hollows. Every hollow that sees the green light would be put into a daze of sorts, and from then on can do nothing but stare at the light, he explained, as Naruto shielded his eyes from the bright light. You could say that this ability would be coveted in Hueco Mundo, he said, and Naruto was surprised to hear a slight bitterness that he hadn't noticed before. So you were basically a slave to the other Ajuchas? Asked Naruto rhetorically. He still couldn't figure just what it wanted with him, though. Yes, and truth be told, I wasn't the only one under the oppression of the Ajuchas, he said, all traces of bitterness gone from his voice. The Ajuchas slouched suddenly, and glanced at the hollows behind him with a look of regret. This entire sector of Hueco Mundo was under the rule of those Ajuchas, and they could not stop. Sometimes they would sneak out of their hive, and begin feasting on normal hollows. Hundreds at a time fell to their hunger. It's safe to say that almost everyone here would be happy to see them gone. What does that have to do me? Asked Naruto, tired of the other hollow beating around the bush. The Firefly hollow straightened himself, now talking in a stronger voice. Simply put, your bravado of entering the forbidden area raised the morale of the hollow. They saw your action as an attempt to overthrow the Ajuchas and claim the hive. But a few rebellious hollows shouldn't be enough to cause that big of a horde. The Ajuchas nodded. This is true. But I knew of the hollows' feelings and used my lure to add some more hollows into the mix. Remember, even if they're mindless, the hollows can still tell when they like something or not. The hollows behind him began to stir, as if they were agreeing with their leader's statement. The reason we followed you is that he trailed off, almost seeming embarrassed by his own words. We want to accompany you to Las Noches. Silence. Nobody said anything for likely the next minute. Naruto blinked at the sudden request, slightly taken aback by it. But he was the only one. The hollows in front of him seemed to have resolved themselves into following him. Why? The insect raised his pincers. Similar to you, I have a personal vendetta that I wish to settle. And joining Las Noches is the perfect chance for me. The hollows behind me have no real purpose, and are simply lured in by my abilities. But they would make a fine escort, and a fine addition to the armies of Las Noches. Naruto shook his head. No, I mean, why would you want to follow me? You're in Ajuchas and are a lot stronger than I am. The bug smiled, though Naruto couldn't see it. It's rare for someone else to share the same sentiments as yourself in the underground. And call it a hunch, but I can sense some massive potential in you. You're a hollow that is going to do a lot of good for our race. I know it. I don't want to waste such an opportunity. Naruto said nothing, but the slightly raised breathing was indication that the other hollow's words had an effect on him. So what do you say? Partners? The Ajuchas held out one of his sharp pincers, clearly wanting to initiate a deal. Naruto stared at the cella for a moment, before looking at its owner. He panned back and forth between them, his black orbs showing indecisiveness, stress, and even a bit of nervousness. The fox hollow slowly raised his paw, before enclosing around the pincer. He tightened his grip, invariably digging his claws into the other hollow's skin. Partners. The Ajucha seemed to lighten up in glee as he shook the claw enthusiastically. He took the pincer away from the fox hollow and pointed at himself. My name's Fuermos. Naruto Uzumaki, said Naruto, a weak smile on his face. Barrigan Lizenbairn was bored. Very bored. He ruled over Las Noches. He had no enemies to fight for the time being, and his army was incredibly strong. So it's only natural that there would be nothing to do, except stare off into space and be bored. His personal guard was kneeling in 2 perfect lines in front of his throne. He scoffed. The bunglers. Their instincts were getting weak, no doubt the result of being away from battle for so long. Maybe he should just split his army into 2 and have them fight each other. That would learn them. He quickly shot down that idea. He might be arrogant, but he didn't rule all of Hueco Mundo, and there were still enemies that are a threat to him. The skeleton Vasto Lord yet again rejected his servant's tea, not wanting any of it. What he did want was to fight. To experience the thrill of battle, to spill blood all over the sands of Hueco Mundo, and to rot some poor soul with his Respira. But who was he kidding? He had been cooped up in the palace for far too long, so going out to battle was nothing short of an impossibility. Hell, he had even run out of hollows to put in his arena, where he and his subjects could watch them slaughter each other. If that would happen, he could actually not be bored for a change. But no, the cells were now running empty, and he couldn't locate any more hollows in the area. The old king sighed again. He just wished that something would happen.